The guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter-demonstrative subsection. I. 16 modes of conveying, separate treatment. 1. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a teaching. 31. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a teaching? The mode of conveying a teaching is summarized in the following verse. Gratification, disappointment, escape, fruit, means the blessed ones. Command to devotees, this mode, is the conveying of a teaching. The act of teaching and what is taught. 32. What does it teach? It teaches as follows. In the aspects of gratification, disappointment, escape, fruit, means an injunction. Bickus, I shall teach you a true idea that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with its own meaning and its own phrasing. I shall display a divine life that is entirely perfect and pure. 33. Herein, what is the gratification? When a mortal desires, if his desire is fulfilled, he is sure to be happy by getting what he wants. This is the gratification. 34. Herein, what is the disappointment? Desire born and willful. If his desires elude him, he becomes as deformed as if pierced by a barb. This is the disappointment. 35. Herein, what is the escape? He that shuns desires, as a snake's head with his foot, and is mindful evades this attachment to the world. This is the escape. 36. Herein, what is the gratification? Fields, gardens and money, cattle and horses, bondsmen and men, women and kin, many are the desires that a man wants. This is the gratification. 36a. Herein, what is the disappointment? Impotent seeming troubles overwhelm and crush him. Then pain invades him as water a broken boat. This is the disappointment. 36b. Herein, what is the escape? So let a man be mindful ever in shunning sense desires. Let him abandon them and cross over the flood. This is the escape. 37. Herein, what is the fruit? The true ideal guards him that walks therein, as does a big umbrella in time of rain. The idea's reward when walked in right is this: who walks therein has no bad destination. This is the fruit. 38. Herein, what is the means? Impermanent are all determinations, and painful too are all determinations. And then besides, not self are all ideas. And so when he sees thus with understanding, he then dispassion finds in suffering. This path it is that leads to purification. This is the means. 39. Herein, what is the injunction? Just as a man with good sight journeying would give wide berth to places of known danger, so too here in this world of animation, let wise men give wide berth to evil things. This is the injunction. 40. Look upon the world as void, Maharaja, is the injunction. Constantly mindful is the means. With self-view extirpated thus you may outstrip mortality, is the fruit. How it is taught. 41. Herein, the Blessed One teaches escape to a person who gains knowledge by what is condensed. He teaches disappointment and escape to a person who gains knowledge by what is expanded. He teaches gratification, disappointment, and escape to a person who is guidable. 42. Herein, there are 4 ways and 4 types of persons. One of craving temperament who is dull finds the outlet, by way of the foundations of mindfulness as support and with the mindfulness faculty, on the way that is painful with sluggish acquaintanceship. One of craving temperament who is intelligent finds the outlet, by way of the for meditations as support and with the concentration faculty, on the way that is painful with swift acquaintanceship. One of view temperament who is dull finds the outlet, by way of the right endeavors as support and with the energy faculty, on the way that is pleasant with sluggish acquaintanceship. One of view temperament who is intelligent finds the outlet, by way of the truths as support and with the understanding faculty, on the way that is pleasant with swift acquaintanceship. 43. Both kinds of craving temperament find the outlet, by way of insight heralded by quiet, to the heart deliverance due to the fading of lust. Both kinds of view temperament find the outlet, by way of quiet heralded by insight, to the understanding deliverance due to the fading of ignorance. 44. Herein, Those who find the outlet by the ways heralded by quiet can be brought to abandoning by means of the conversion of relishing guideline, while those who find the outlet by the ways heralded by insight can be brought to abandoning by means of the lion's play guideline. How it is apprehended. 45. Where does this mode of conveying actually come into being? When the master or some respected companion in the divine life teaches the true idea to someone, then that someone, on hearing that true idea, acquires faith. 46. Herein, inquiry, interest, estimating, scrutiny, is understanding consisting in what is heard. Such like inquiry, estimating, scrutiny, mental looking over, with what has been heard as the support, is understanding consisting in cogitation. Knowledge that, in one associating his attention with these two kinds of understanding, arises on the plane of seeing or on the plane of keeping in being, is understanding consisting in keeping in being. Now, understanding consisting in what is heard arises from another's utterance. Understanding consisting in cogitation arises from reasoned attention molded for oneself. Understanding consisting in keeping in being is knowledge that arises by means of another's utterance and by means of reasoned attention molded for oneself. 47. He in whom there are the two kinds of understanding, namely that consisting in what is heard and that consisting in cogitation, is one who gains knowledge by what is condensed. He in whom there is understanding consisting in what is heard, but no understanding consisting in cogitation is one who gains knowledge by what is expanded. He in whom there is neither understanding consisting in what is heard nor understanding consisting in cogitation is guidable. The teaching as presentation of the four truths. 48. What does the teaching of the true idea teach? The four truths, namely suffering, origin, cessation, and the path. Disappointment and fruit are suffering. Gratification is origin. Escape is cessation. Means and injunction are the path. These are the four truths. 49. Now this is the wheel of the true idea, according as the Blessed One said. This is suffering. At Benares, Bicas, in the deer park at Isopatana, the matchless wheel of the true idea was thus set rolling by me, not to be stopped by monk or divine or God or Mara or divinity or anyone in the world. And the whole wheel of the true idea. Discourse should be quoted. Herein there are terms of ungauged measure, letters of ungauged measure, phrases, moods, linguistics, and demonstrations of ungauged measure, but there is an explaining, displaying, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, and describing of that very meaning in the ninefold thread. This is the noble truth of suffering. 50. This is the origin of suffering. At Benares, Bicas, in the deer park at Isopatana, the matchless wheel of the true idea was set rolling by me. 51. This is the cessation of suffering. At Benares, Bicas. 52. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. At Benares, Bicas, in the deer park at Isopatana, the matchless wheel of the true idea was thus set rolling by me, not to be stopped by monk or divine or God or Mara or divinity or anyone in the world. Herein there are terms of ungauged measure, letters of ungauged measure, phrases, moods, linguistics, and demonstrations of ungauged measure, but there is an explaining, displaying, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, and describing of that very meaning in the ninefold thread. This is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. How the teaching is variously presented. 53. Herein, the Blessed One explains by letters, displays by terms, divulges by phrases, analyses by moods, exhibits by linguistics, and describes by demonstrations. 54. Herein, the Blessed One condenses by letters and terms, he expands by phrases and moods, he details by linguistics and demonstrations. 55. Herein, condensing is the beginning, expanding is the middle, and detailing is the end. 56. This true idea and outguiding discipline, when it is condensed, guides out, disciplines, the type of person who gains knowledge by what is condensed, hence good in the beginning is said. When expanded it guides out, disciplines, the type of person who gains knowledge by what is expanded, hence good in the middle is said. When detailed it guides out, disciplines, the type of person who is guidable, hence good in the end is said. 57. Herein, 6 terms concern the meaning, namely explaining, displaying, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, and describing. These 6 terms concern the meaning. And 6 terms concern the phrasing, namely letter, term, phrase, mood, linguistic, and demonstration. These 6 terms concern the phrasing. That is why the Blessed One said, Bickus, I shall teach you a true idea that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with its own meaning and its own phrasing. I shall display a divine life that is entirely perfect and pure. 58. Entirely, disjoined from worlds, not mixed with world ideas. Perfect, perfected, with nothing lacking and nothing superfluous. Pure, immaculate, with all stains removed, established as fit for all kinds of distinctions. 59. Among agreeable forms, and this is called a perfect one's footprint, and something used by a perfect one, and something marked by a perfect one. With that, this divine life is evident. That is why the Blessed One said, I shall display a divine life that is entirely perfect and pure, for whom the teaching is intended. 60. For whom is this teaching of the true idea? For devotees. This is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, gratification, disappointment, escape, fruit, means the Blessed Ones. Command to devotees, this mode, is the conveying of a teaching. The mode of conveying a teaching is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter-demonstrative subsection. Continued. 2. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying an investigation. 61. Herein, what is the mode of conveying an investigation? The mode of conveying an investigation is summarized in the following verse. What in the thread is asked and answered, as well as a verse paraphrase, and the thread's term investigation. This mode conveys investigation. 62. What does it investigate? It investigates term, question, answer, consecutivity, gratification, disappointment, escape, fruit, means, injunction, mode 1, paraphrasing verse. All that is in the ninefold thread of argument. How would that be? 1. Term, question, answer, consecutivity. 63. It would be, firstly, according to the Venerable Ajita's question asked of the Blessed One in the Parayana chapter of the Satanapada, tell what is the world shut in by? So said the Venerable Ajita. And whereby is it not displayed? And what is it besmeared with? Say, and what will be its greatest fear? 64. These 4 terms asked are one question. Why? Because of their comprising a single thing. For in asking thus, tell, what is the world shut in by? He asks, the question expressed in terms of the world. In asking, and wherefore is it not displayed? He asks about the world's undisplayedness. In asking, and what is it besmeared with? Say he asks about the world's besmearedness. And in asking, and what will be its greatest fear? He asks about that same world's greatest fear. The world is of 3 kinds. World of defilement, world of being, existence, and world of faculties. 65. Herein the answer is this. By ignorance is the world shut in. Ajita, the Blessed One, said, 'Tis undisplayed through miswishing and neglect, and hankering smears it, I say. Suffering is its greatest fear. 66. Those 4 terms are answered by these 4 terms, the first by the first, the second by the second, the third by the third, and the fourth by the fourth. By ignorance is the world shut in is the answer to, tell what is the world shut in by. The world is shut in by hindrances. For all creatures have ignorance as their in shutting hindrance. According as the Blessed One said, Bickus, I say that, relatively speaking, all creatures, all breathing things, all beings, have one hindrance only, that is to say, ignorance. For all creatures have ignorance as hindrance. And Bickus, it is with the entire cessation of ignorance, with giving it up and relinquishing it, that creatures have no more hindrance, I say. By this the answer to the first term is appropriately construed. 67. And again, 'tis undisplayed through miswishing and neglect, is the answer to, and wherefore is it undisplayed? When a person is shut in by hindrances, he miswishes, vivichati, and miswishing, vivicha, is what uncertainty, visakicha, is called. When he is uncertain, visakichanto, he does not settle his faith. When he does not settle his faith, he does not instigate energy for the abandoning of unprofitable ideas, and for the verification of profitable ideas. Here he abides devoted to negligence. When he is negligent, he does not arouse ideas that belong to the white side. Not being aroused, they are not displayed to him, according as the Blessed One said, "The true are from afar displayed, as Himalaya's mountain is, but the untrue are seen not here, like arrows in the night let fly. They are displayed by qualities, by reputation and by fame." By this the answer to the second term is appropriately construed. 68. And hankering smears it, I say, is the answer to, and what is it besmeared with? Say. Hankering so named is what craving is called. How does that besmear? In the way stated by the Blessed One, who lusts no meaning ever knows, who lust sees never an idea, the murk of darkness laps a man, when he will suffer lust to be. This craving, in a person greatly clutching at existence, taken thus as great hankering, is that wherein the world comes to be besmeared. By this the answer to the third term is appropriately construed. 69. And lastly, suffering is its greatest fear is the answer to, and what will be its greatest fear? Suffering is of two kinds, bodily and mental. The bodily kind is pain, while the mental kind is grief. All creatures are sensitive to suffering. Since there is no fear equal to that of suffering, how could there be any greater? There are three kinds of painfulness. Painfulness as bodily pain, painfulness in change, and painfulness in determinations. Herein, the world is, at one time or another, limitedly free from painfulness as bodily pain, and likewise from painfulness in change. Why is that? Because there are those in the world who have little sickness and are long-lived. But only the element of extinction without trace left liberates from the painfulness in determinations. That is why suffering is its greatest fear, taking it that painfulness in determinations is the world's inherent liability to suffering. By this the answer to the fourth term is appropriately construed. That is why the Blessed One said, "By ignorance is the world shut in." 70. The streams keep streaming everywhere. So said the Venerable Ajita. What is it that shuts off the streams? Tell then what is restraint of streams, whereby it is that streams are sealed. 71. These four terms asked are two questions. Why? Because here, the question is asked with a plurality of designations. With the world proceeding in this way, with the world thus defiled, what is 1. Its cleansing, and 2. Its emergence. 72. Accordingly, he said, the streams keep streaming everywhere. When someone is unconcentrated and much given to covetousness, ill will, and negligence, they keep streaming in him. Herein, covetousness is the unprofitable root consisting in greed. Ill will is the unprofitable root consisting in hate, and negligence is the unprofitable root consisting in delusion. When someone is unconcentrated, craving keeps streaming in his six bases. Craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for flavors, craving for tangibles, and craving for ideas. According as the Blessed One said, it keeps streaming, bickus. This is a designation for the six bases in oneself. The eye keeps streaming to agreeable forms and resisting disagreeable forms. The ear, nose, tongue, body. The mind keeps streaming to agreeable ideas and resisting disagreeable ideas. So it keeps streaming on in all ways and in all manners. That is why he said, the streams keep streaming everywhere. 73. With the words, what is it that shuts off the streams? He asks about deterrence of obsession. This is cleansing. With the words, tell then what is restraint of streams, whereby it is that streams are sealed, he asks about eradication of underlying tendencies. This is emergence. 74. Here are the answers. Whatever streams are in the world, Ajita, the Blessed One, said, they are shut off by mindfulness. The stream's restraint, I tell, whereby they can be sealed, is understanding. 75. When mindfulness occupied with the body is kept in being and made much of, the eye is not attracted among agreeable forms, and is unresistant among disagreeable forms. The ear, nose, tongue, body. The mind is not attracted among agreeable ideas, is unresistant among disagreeable ideas. For what reason? Because the faculties are restrained and shut off. Restrained and shut off by what? By mindfulness's preservation. That is why the Blessed One said, they are shut off by mindfulness. 76. And again, the underlying tendencies are abandoned by understanding. When the underlying tendencies are abandoned, the obsessions are abandoned. Why with the abandoning of the underlying tendencies? Just as, when the complete uprooting of a tree with its trunk is effected, the continuity of flowers, fruits, shoots, and buds is severed, so too, when the underlying tendencies are abandoned, the continuity of obsessions is severed, closed, covered up. By what? By understanding. That is why the Blessed One said that, whereby they can be sealed is understanding. 77. Understanding and mindfulness. So said the Venerable Ajita. And now, good sir, this name and form, tell me then what I ask of you, where does this come to its surcease? As to the question that you ask, Ajita, I shall tell you now, where both this name and form do come, to their remainderless surcease, with cessation of consciousness. 'Tis here this comes to its surcease. 78. This question asks about the sequence of meaning. When asking about sequence of meaning, what does it ask about? About the element of extinction without trace left. 79. Three truths are determined, inseparable from the idea of cessation. They are suffering, origin, and the path. Cessation is undetermined. Herein, origin is abandoned on two planes, on the plane of seeing and on the plane of keeping in being. Three fetters are abandoned by seeing: embodiment, view, uncertainty, and misapprehension of virtue and duty. 7 fetters are abandoned by keeping in being: will to sensual desire, ill will, lust for form, lust for formlessness, conceit, agitation, and the remainder of ignorance. 80. These are the 10 fetters in the triple element of existence. 5 belong to the hither side and 5 to the further side. 81. Herein, 3 fetters, namely embodiment, view, uncertainty, and misapprehension of virtue and duty, cease with the expression of the I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, and 7 fetters, namely will to sensual desire, ill will, lust for form, lust for formlessness, conceit, agitation, and the remainder of ignorance, cease with the expression of the act of final knowing faculty. Now 2 kinds of knowledge, namely what he knows thus birth is exhausted for me, which is knowledge about exhaustion, and what he knows thus there is no more of this beyond, which is knowledge of non-arising, constitute the final knower faculty. 82. Herein, the I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, and the act of final knowing faculty cease in him who reaches the supreme fruit that is arahantship. 83. Herein, the 2 kinds of knowledge, namely knowledge about exhaustion and knowledge about non-arising, are one kind of understanding, but it has 2 names according to imputation. In one who is understanding thus birth is exhausted for me, it has the name knowledge about exhaustion, while in one who is understanding thus there is no more of this beyond, it has the name knowledge about non-arising. That is understanding in the sense of act of understanding, and it is mindfulness in the sense of the act of not floating away from its object, according as it has seen it. 84. Herein, the 5 categories of assumption constitute name and form, and herein the ideas that have contact as 5th constitute name, while the 5 form faculties, beginning with the I, constitute form, and both of these with the associated consciousness constitute name and form. 85. It was in asking the Blessed One about the cessation of that name and form that the Venerable Ajita spoke in the Parayana thus: understanding and mindfulness. And now, good sir, this name and form, tell me then what I ask of you, where does this come to its surcease? 86. Herein, mindfulness and understanding represent 4 faculties. Mindfulness represents 2 faculties, namely the mindfulness faculty and the concentration faculty, while understanding represents 2 faculties, namely the understanding faculty and the energy faculty. Any act of having faith, act of trusting, in these 4 faculties is the faith faculty. 87. Herein, any unification of cognizance with faith in predominance is concentration of will. Any power of deliberation, or any power of keeping in being, owed to suppression of defilements while cognizance is concentrated, is endeavor. Herein, any in breath and out-breath, any thinking and exploring, any perception and feeling, any memories and intentions are determinations. So the prior concentration of will and then the endeavor owed to suppression of defilement and these determinations, both these he keeps in being as this first basis for success that possesses concentration of will with endeavor and determinations, which is supported by seclusion, supported by fading, supported by cessation and changes to relinquishment. 88. Herein, any unification of cognizance with energy in predominance is concentration of energy. 89. Herein, any unification of cognizance with natural concentration of cognizance in predominance is concentration of cognizance. 90. Herein, any unification of cognizance with inquiry in predominance is concentration of inquiry. Any power of deliberation, or any power of keeping in being, owed to suppression of defilements when cognizance is concentrated, is endeavor. Herein, any in breath and out-breath, any thinking and exploring, any perception and feeling, any memories and intentions are determinations. So the prior concentration of inquiry, and then the endeavor owed to suppression of defilements, and these determinations, both these he keeps in being as this fourth basis for success that possesses concentration of inquiry, as well as endeavor and determinations, which is supported by seclusion, supported by fading, supported by cessation, and changes to relinquishment. 91. All concentration has knowledge for its root, is heralded by knowledge, and has parallel occurrence with knowledge. With open and untrammeled cognizance, he keeps in being cognizance with lucidity thus. As before, so after. As after, so before. And as by night, by day. And as by day, by night. 92. The five profitable faculties of faith, etc., are coexistent with cognizance, arise when cognizance arises, and cease when cognizance ceases. And name and form has consciousness for its cause, and it has occurrence with consciousness for its condition. When its cause is interrupted by the path, consciousness being then without nutriment, with nothing expectantly relished, without standing, without relinking, ceases. No name and form occurs in a new existence without cause and without condition. So with the cessation of consciousness, name and form ceases, and also understanding and mindfulness. That is why the Blessed One said, as to the question that you ask, Ajita, I shall tell you now, where both this name and form do come, to their remainderless surcease, with cessation of consciousness. 'Tis here this comes to its surcease. 93. There are the masters of ideas, so said the Venerable Ajita, and several initiates here. Good sir, if asked you have the skill to tell me their behavior. 94. These three terms asked are three questions. Why? By construing respectively as the adept, the initiate, and also the kind of abandoning heralded by insight. For when he said, there are the masters of ideas, he was asking about arahantship. When he said, and several initiates here, he was asking about the 7 kinds of initiate. And when he said, good sir, if asked you have the skill to tell me their behavior, he was asked about the kind of abandoning heralded by insight. 95. Here is the answer. Sensual desires he would not want. Ajita, the Blessed One, said. He would be undisturbed in mind, and skilled in all ideas. A bhikkhu is mindful in his wanderings. 96. All the Blessed One's bodily action is heralded by knowledge and has parallel occurrence with knowledge. All his verbal action is heralded by knowledge and has parallel occurrence with knowledge. All his mental action is heralded by knowledge and has parallel occurrence with knowledge. His knowing and seeing is unrestricted in the case of the past period, in the case of the future period, and in the case of the presently arisen period. What resistance to his knowing and seeing should there be? Resistance to knowing and seeing is any unknowing and unseeing in the case of what is impermanent, painful, and not self. Just as a man here might see the forms of the stars but might not know what number to impute to them. This is resistance to knowing and seeing. But the Blessed One's knowing and seeing is unresisted. For the enlightened ones, the Blessed Ones, have unobstructed knowing and seeing. 97. Herein cognizance has to be guarded by an initiate with respect to two kinds of ideas. From wanting with respect to ideas provocative of lust and from hate with respect to ideas provocative of obsession. 98 With respect to these the Blessed One said sensual desires he would not want warning against any wishes, infatuations, aspirations, longing, or toying, and with the words, he would be undisturbed in mind, he mentioned abolition of obsession. For when an initiate wants accordingly, he arouses unarisen defilement and he swells arisen defilement. But he who makes efforts with undisturbed intention and not wanting, produces will for the non-arising of unarisen evil and profitable ideas, makes efforts, instigates energy, exerts cognizance and endeavors. 2. He produces will for the abandoning of arisen evil and profitable ideas, makes efforts, instigates energy, exerts cognizance and endeavors. 3. He produces will for the arising of unarisen profitable ideas, makes efforts, instigates energy, exerts cognizance, and endeavors. And 4. He produces will for the endurance, non-forgetting, increase, abundance, maintenance in being and fulfillment of arisen profitable ideas, and he makes efforts, instigates energy, exerts cognizance and endeavors. 99. What are the unarisen evil and profitable ideas? They are thinking with sensual desire, thinking with ill will, and thinking with cruelty. These are the unarisen evil and profitable ideas. 2. What are the arisen evil and profitable ideas? They are the underlying tendencies, the roots of the unprofitable. These are the arisen evil and profitable ideas. 3. What are the unarisen profitable ideas? They are the faculties that belong to the stream enterer. These are the unarisen profitable ideas. 4. What are the arisen profitable ideas? They are the faculties that belong to him who stands on a path. These are the arisen profitable ideas. 100. That whereby he shuts off thinking with sensual desire is the mindfulness faculty. That whereby he shuts off thinking with ill will is the concentration faculty. That whereby he shuts off thinking with cruelty is the energy faculty. That whereby he abandons, dispels, terminates, annihilates, and will not endure evil and profitable ideas as soon as they arise, is the understanding faculty. And any act of trusting in these four faculties is the faith faculty. 101. Herein, where is the faith faculty met with? In the four factors of stream entry. Where is the energy faculty met with? In the four right endeavors. Where is the mindfulness faculty met with? In the four foundations of mindfulness. Where is the concentration faculty met with? In the four meditations. Where is the understanding faculty met with? In the four noble truths. 102. That is why the initiate who is diligent in all profitable ideas is spoken of by the Blessed One, in terms of mental non-disturbance. That is why the Blessed One said, he would be undisturbed in mind. 103. Skilled in all ideas. The world is threefold as the world of defilement, the world of being, existence, and the world of faculties. 104. Herein, the world of being, existence, comes about by way of the world of defilement. That causes the occurrence of the faculties. When the faculties are kept in being, there is diagnosis of what is knowable. That diagnosis has to be scrutinized in two ways, as diagnosis by seeing and diagnosis by abandoning. For when an initiate understands the knowable, then the knowable is diagnosed with perception and attention accompanied by dispassion, and two ideas in him then attain to skill. Skill in seeing and skill in keeping in being. That knowledge should be understood as fivefold, namely acquaintanceship, diagnosis, abandoning, keeping in being, and verification. 105. Herein, what is acquaintanceship? It is any knowledge about the individual characteristics of ideas, and about the discrimination of ideas and the discrimination of meanings. This is acquaintanceship. 106. Herein, what is diagnosis? After becoming acquainted in these ways, it is any diagnosis as follows. This is profitable, this is unprofitable, this is blameworthy, this is blameless, this is black, this is bright, this is to be cultivated, this is not to be cultivated. These ideas, having been taken thus, make this fruit occur. This is their meaning when taken thus. This is diagnosis. 107. After diagnosing in this way, three kinds of ideas remain. those to be abandoned, those to be kept in being, and those to be verified. 108. Herein, what ideas are to be abandoned? Any that are unprofitable. 109. Herein, what ideas are to be kept in being? Any that are profitable. 110. Herein, what ideas are to be verified? The undetermined. 111. He who knows this is called skilled in meanings, skilled in ideas, skilled in goodness, skilled in fruits, skilled in ways, skilled in unease, skilled in ease, possessed of great skill. That is why the Blessed One said, skilled in all ideas. 112. A bhikkhu is mindful in his wanderings. He should, for the purpose of a pleasant abiding here and now, abide mindful and aware in advancing and retreating, in looking and looking away, in flexing and extending, in wearing the patched cloak, bowl, and other robes, in eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, in evacuating and making water, in walking, standing, sitting, going to sleep, waking, talking, and keeping silent. 113. Two kinds of conduct agreed by the Blessed One are these: one for those already purified, and one for those still being purified. Who are those already purified? They are the arahants. Who are those still being purified? They are the initiates. And arahants' faculties have done their task. 114. The discoverable is fourfold as actualization of the diagnosis of suffering, actualization of the abandoning of origin, actualization of the keeping and being of the path, and actualization of the verification of cessation. This is the fourfold discoverable. 115. He who knows this is called one who advances mindful, who retreats mindful, with the exhaustion of lust, the exhaustion of hate, and the exhaustion of delusion. That is why the Blessed One said, sensual desires he would not want. He would be undisturbed in mind, and skilled in all ideas. A bhikkhu is mindful in his wanderings. That is how it can be asked, and that is how it can be answered. 2. Gratification, etc. See Mode 1. 3. Paraphrasing verse. 116. And a thread's paraphrasing verse must be properly guided in as to meaning as well as to phrasing. For phrasing destitute of meaning is idle chatter. Also, the meaning of badly presented terms and phrasing is hard to apply a guideline to. That is why a paraphrase verse should be versified in a manner furnished with meaning as well as phrasing. 4. All that is in the ninefold thread of argument. 117. The thread should also be investigated thus. What kind is this thread of argument? Is it one that consists of an original statement, a statement elucidating a sequence of meaning? One whose meaning is already guided? One whose meaning has yet to be guided? And also, is it one that deals with corruption, that deals with morality, that deals with penetration, or that deals with the adept? Where in this thread of argument are all the four truths met with, in its beginning, in its middle, or in its end? That is how the thread of argument should be investigated. 118. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, what in the thread is asked and answered, as well as a verse paraphrase, and the thread's term investigation. This mode conveys investigation. The mode of conveying an investigation is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 3. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a construing. 119. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a construing? The mode of conveying a construing is this: looking for right and wrong construing. In the case of all the conveyings, plain and resort will demonstrate. The mode conveying a construing. 120. What does it construe? The four principal appeals to authority. These are the appeal to the enlightened one as authority, the appeal to a community as authority, the appeal to several elders as authority, and the appeal to a single elder as authority. These are the four principal appeals to authority. 121. In all such appeals to authority, these terms and phrasing must, in the case of the thread, be conformable to the ways of entry to it, and in the case of the outguiding discipline, be seen therefore oneself, and they must, in the case of the essential nature of the idea, be adaptable to it. 122. What is the thread to whose ways of entry they must be conformable? The Four Noble Truths. 123. What is the outguiding discipline where they must be seen for oneself? The outguiding of lust, the outguiding of hate, and the outguiding of delusion. 124. What is the essential nature of the idea to which they must be adaptable? Dependent arising. 125. If, in the case of the noble truths, there is a way of entry to them, and if, in the case of the outguiding of defilements, it is seen for oneself, and if, in the case of the essential nature of the idea, there is no running counter to it, then there is no generation of taints. Whatever is so construable from among the four principal appeals to authority can be accepted, whatever it is construable by and however it is construed. 126. When in the thread someone is asked a question, the question should be fathomed and investigated as to the terms thus. How many terms are there in the question? If all the terms are in concord about a single meaning, that is a single question. If four terms are in concord about a single meaning, that is a single question. If three terms are in concord about a single meaning, that is a single question. If two terms are in concord about a single meaning, that is a single question. If one term is in concord about a single meaning, that is a single question. 127. When scrutinizing it, what one needs to recognize is this. Now, are these ideas different in meaning and different in phrasing? Or have these ideas a single meaning, only the phrasing being different? 128. How would that be? According as the deity asked the Blessed One the following questions. The world, by what is it struck down? And then by what is it beset? What barb has it been entered by? And by what harassed constantly? 129. These four terms asked are three questions. How is that recognized? Because the Blessed One answered the deity as follows. Mortality strikes down the world, and then it is beset by aging, and craving's barb has entered it, and wishes harass it constantly. 130. Herein, aging and death are two of the determined characteristics of the determined. For aging is alteration of what is steady, and death is subsidence. 131. Herein there is a difference between the meanings of aging and of death. For what reason? Because those who die in the womb never become aged. And there is death among the gods, though their physical frames do not age. One can get by aging, but death one cannot get by, except for what is in the province of those possessing supernormal success. 132. Now when it is said, craving's barb has entered it, those without lust are seen to age and die. And if craving were the same as aging and death, then that being so, all those who were youthful would be without craving. And if, in the way that craving is the origin of suffering, so too were aging and death the origin of suffering, then that aging and death would actually be the origin of suffering and craving would not be the origin of suffering. But aging and death are not the origin of suffering, and craving is the origin of suffering. And if, in the way that craving is exterminable by the path, so too aging and death were the same, then aging and death would also be exterminable by the path. 133. By means of this kind of construction it can be examined with various other reasons whether the construction is seen for oneself and whether otherness of meaning is coordinated, and it should be examined as to phrasing as well. 134. Now in the case of the two ideas, namely barb and harassment, there is oneness of meaning, for no difference is construable between the meanings of wishes and craving. When craving's intent is not fulfilled, anger and spite arise with respect to the 9 grounds for annoyance. 135. By means of this construction there is otherness in the meanings of aging, of death, and of craving. 136. However, when the Blessed One calls this by the two names, wishes and craving, it is in virtue of the external grounds which are its object that it is called by him by the two names, wishes and craving. For all craving has the single characteristic of cleaving to, just as all fire has the single characteristic of heating, though it has various other names according to its consumption, assumed, that is to say, log fire and grass fire and brushwood fire and cowdung fire and chaff fire and rubbish fire, yet all fire has only the characteristic of heating, so too, all craving has only one characteristic, namely the characteristic of cleaving to, though it is called by various other names according to the fuel consumption. Assumed, that is its object, that is to say, wishes and craving and barb and harassment and the current and attachment and affection moisture, and torment and the creeper and conceiving in terms of I and mine, and responsibility and need and thirst and expectant relishing. Yet all craving has only one characteristic, namely the characteristic of cleaving to, according as it is stated in the mode of conveying synonyms. 137. Need and longing, expectant relishing, enticements on the several elements based, hankering whose being is rooted in unknowing. To all that with its root I put an end. 138. That is synonymous with craving, according as the Blessed One said, Tissa, when someone is not without lust, not without will, not without love, not without thirst, not without fever, for form, for feeling, for perception, for determinations, for consciousness. All of which argument can be cited in detail. 139. This synonym for craving is construable in this way. All access to suffering has for its root determinations, conditioned by craving for sensual desires. It is not construable in this way. All access to dispassion has for its root some requisite of craving for sensual desires. By means of this construction it can be examined with various other reasons. 140. For just as the Blessed One teaches ugliness to a person of lusting temperament, teaches loving kindness to a person of hating temperament, teaches dependent arising to a person of deluded temperament. For if he taught to a person of lusting temperament the heart deliverance of loving kindness, or the pleasant way with sluggish acquaintanceship, or the pleasant way with swift acquaintanceship, or the kind of abandoning heralded by insight, the teaching could not be construed. So too, whatever conforms with the abandoning of lust, whatever conforms with the abandoning of hate, and whatever conforms with the abandoning of delusion, can all be construed under the mode of conveying a construing, after investigating it under the mode of conveying an investigation so far as the plane of knowledge extends. 141. When someone abides in loving kindness, the teaching is not construable thus. Ill will keeps gripping his heart. The teaching is construable thus. Ill will is abandoned and disappears in him. 142. When someone abides in compassion, the teaching is not construable thus. Cruelty keeps gripping his heart. The teaching is construable thus. Cruelty is abandoned and disappears in him. 143. When someone abides in gladness, the teaching is not construable thus. Boredom keeps gripping his heart. The teaching is construable thus. Boredom is abandoned and disappears in him. 144. When someone abides in onlooking equanimity, the teaching is not construable thus. Lust keeps gripping his heart. The teaching is construable thus. Lust is abandoned and disappears in him. 145. When someone abides in the signless, the teaching is not construable thus. His cognizance occurs by means of this or that by following signs. The teaching is construable thus. Any sign is abandoned and disappears in him. 146. When the conceiving I am is absent, the teaching is not construable thus. I do not see thus, I am this. Yet the barb of uncertainty and wondering what am I, how am I, keeps gripping my cognizance. The teaching is construable thus. The barb of uncertainty and wondering is abandoned and disappears in me. 147. Again, when someone has entered upon the first meditation, the teaching is not construable thus. Lust for sensual desires and ill will occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable thus. Perception and attention accompanied by what is without thinking occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his distinction. 148. When someone has entered upon the second meditation, the teaching is not construable thus. Perception and attention accompanied by what has thinking and exploring occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable thus. Perception and attention accompanied by what has pleasure due to onlooking equanimity occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his distinction. 149. When someone has entered upon the third meditation, the teaching is not construable thus. Perception and attention accompanied by what has pleasure due to happiness occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable thus. Perception and attention accompanied by mindfulness whose purity is due to onlooking equanimity occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable thus. They occur in his distinction. 150. When someone has entered upon the fourth meditation, The teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by what has pleasure due to onlooking equanimity occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of infiniteness of space occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his distinction. 151. When someone has entered upon the base consisting of infiniteness of space, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by form occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of infiniteness of consciousness occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his distinction. 152. When someone has entered upon the base consisting of infiniteness of consciousness, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of infiniteness of space occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of no owning occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his distinction. 153. When someone has entered upon the base consisting of no owning, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of infiniteness of consciousness occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his distinction. 154. When someone has entered upon the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception, the teaching is not construable, thus the accesses to perception occur in his distinction. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his inferior state. Or alternatively, the teaching is not construable, thus perception and attention accompanied by cessation of perception and feeling occur in his inferior state. The teaching is construable, thus they occur in his distinction. 155. The teaching is not construable, thus cognizance is healthy when it does not submit to directive management. The teaching is construable, thus cognizance is healthy when it submits to directive management. 156. That is how all the ninefold thread should, after being in all ways investigated in accordance with the mode of conveying an investigation, be construed in accordance with the mode of conveying a construing, doing so according to the true idea, according to the outguiding discipline, and according to the master's dispensation. 157. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, looking for right and wrong construing, in the case of all the conveyings, plain and resort will demonstrate the mode conveying a construing. The mode of conveying a construing is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 4. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying footings. 158. Herein, what is the mode of conveying footings? The mode of conveying footings is this. The victor teaching an idea teaches what that idea has too, as footing, so with each idea. This is the mode conveying footings. 159. What does this mode teach? It teaches as follows. Definitions of the 18 root terms. C. Ignorance has the characteristic of not penetrating ideas according to actuality. Its footing is the for perversions. Craving has the characteristic of cleaving to. Its footing is endearing form or alluring form. Greed has the characteristic of aspiring. Its footing is the taking of what is not given. Hate has the characteristic of willing ill. Its footing is killing breathing things. Delusion has the characteristic of wrongly theorizing about things. Its footing is wrong theory. Perception of beauty has the characteristic of apprehending color, shape, and features. Its footing is non-restraint of the faculties, beginning with the eye. Perception of pleasure has the characteristic of approaching contact affected by taints. Its footing is gratification. Perception of permanence has the characteristic of unseeing of ideas that have the characteristic of being determined, that they are so. Its footing is consciousness. Perception of self has the characteristic of not seeing with perception of impermanence and perception of pain. Its footing is the name body. 160 Science has the characteristic of penetrating all ideas. Its footing is the knowable. Quiet has the characteristic of preventing distraction of cognizance. Its footing is the kinds of ugliness. Non-greed has the characteristic of preventing recourse to wishes. Its footing is abstention from taking what is not given. Non-hate has the characteristic of non-ill will. Its footing is abstention from killing breathing things. Non-delusion has the characteristic of not wrongly theorizing about things. Its footing is right theory. Perception of ugliness has the characteristic of apprehending the discolored corpse stage and the festering corpse stage. Its footing is dispassion. Perception of pain has the characteristic of diagnosing contact affected by taints. Its footing is feeling. Perception of impermanence has the characteristic of seeing ideas that have the characteristic of being determined. Its footing is rise and subsidence, fall. Perception of not self has the characteristic of non-insistence in the case of all ideas. Its footing is perception of ideas. Further definitions. 161. The 5 strands of sensual desire are the footing for lust for sensual desires. The 5 faculties, beginning with the eye that have form, are the footing for lust for form. The 6th base, namely that of mind, is the footing for lust for being, existence. The state of a contemplator of being, existence, as occurrence is the footing for the 5 categories of assumption. Recollection of past life is the footing for knowing and seeing. Definitions of the 5 faculties. 162. Faith has the characteristic of trusting, and its manifestation is belief. Confidence has the characteristic of being undisturbed, and its manifestation is confiding, clarification. Faith has the characteristic of credence. Its footing is confidence by having undergone. Confidence has the characteristic of being undisturbed. Its footing is faith. 163. Energy has the characteristic of instigating. Its footing is a right endeavor. Mindfulness has the characteristic of non-drifting. Its footing is a foundation of mindfulness. Concentration has the characteristic of unification. Its footing is the meditations. Understanding has the characteristic of act of understanding. Its footing is the 4 truths. Definitions of the members of the formula of dependent arising. 164. Another guideline. Unreasoned attention has the characteristic of directing attention to gratification. Its footing is ignorance. Ignorance has the characteristic of confusing truth. It is the footing for determinations. Determinations have the characteristic of developing renewal of being, existence. They are the footing for consciousness. Consciousness has the characteristic of causing occurrence by opening the way to reappearance. It is the footing for name and form. Name and form has the characteristic of conjoining the name body and the form body. It is the footing for the 6-fold base. The 6-fold base has the characteristic of defining the 6 faculties. It is the footing for contact. Contact has the characteristic of causing concurrence of e.g. I, forms, and consciousness. It is the footing for feeling, affectivity. Feeling has the characteristic of being coessential with the wished for and the unwished for. It is the footing for craving. Craving has the characteristic of cleaving to. It is the footing for assuming. Assuming opens the way to reappearance. It is the footing for being, existence. Being, existence, has the characteristic of giving actual being, existence, to the name body and the form body. It is the footing for birth. Birth has the characteristic of giving manifest being, existence, to the categories. It is the footing for aging. Aging has the characteristic of over-ripening the essentials of existence. It is the footing for death. Death has the characteristic of interrupting the life faculty. It is the footing for sorrow. Sorrow, sakha, causes care, asukha. It is the footing for lamentation. Lamentation causes constant crying out. It is the footing for pain. Pain is oppression of body. It is the footing for grief. Grief is oppression of cognizance. It is the footing for despair. Despair causes surrendering. It is the footing for being. How being comes about. 165. When these factors of being existence are exist, by their having occurrence in harmony, then that is being existence. That is the footing for the roundabout of rebirths. Further definitions. 166. The path has the characteristic of giving outlet. It is the footing for cessation. 167. Knowledge of watering places is the footing for knowledge of what it is to have drunk enough. Knowledge of what it is to have drunk enough is the footing for knowledge of the right amount. Knowledge of the right amount, matnuda, is the footing for self-knowledge, atnuda. Self-knowledge is the footing for the state of having previously performed merit. The state of having previously performed merit is the footing for living in befitting places. Living in befitting places is the footing for waiting on true men. Waiting on true men is the footing for right disposition in self-guidance. Right disposition in self-guidance is the footing for the kinds of virtue. The kinds of virtue are the footing for gladness. Gladness is the footing for tranquility. Tranquility is the footing for pleasure. Pleasure is the footing for concentration. Concentration is the footing for knowing and seeing how things are. Knowing and seeing how things are is the footing for dispassion. Dispassion is the footing for fading of lust. Fading of lust is the footing for deliverance. Deliverance is the footing for knowing and seeing of deliverance. 168. In this way, all kinds of general support, all kinds of conditions are a footing. 169. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, the victor teaching an idea teaches what that idea has too, as footing. So with all ideas, this is the mode conveying footings. The mode conveying footings is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 5. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying characteristics. 170. Herein, what is the mode of conveying characteristics? The mode of conveying characteristics is this. When one idea is mentioned, all ideas of like characteristic are mentioned too. This constitutes the mode conveying characteristics. 171. How does it characterize? It does so as follows. When certain ideas have a single common characteristic, then when one of those ideas is stated, the rest of those ideas are stated. 172. How would that be? According, for example, as the Blessed One said, Bhikkhu, the eye is unstable, small, trifling, fleeting. Besides, it is painful, destructible, liable to dislodgement, ashes, a determination. It is a victim for slaughter in the midst of enemies. Now when this eye is stated, the rest of the bases in oneself, beginning with the ear, are stated. For what reason? Because all the bases in oneself have a single common characteristic in the sense of victim for slaughter. 173. And according as the Blessed One said, Radha, do not look back with yearning to past form. Do not expectantly relish future form. Practice the way to dispassion, fading of lust, ceasing, giving up and relinquishment, as to presently arisen form. Now when this form category is stated, the rest of the categories are stated. For what reason? Because in the Yamakavada Sutta all the 5 categories of assumption have a single characteristic in the sense of victim for slaughter. 174. And according as the Blessed One said, they whose mindfulness of body is constantly well instigated, do never what should not be done, and ever do what should be done. So when mindfulness occupied with the body is stated, mindfulness occupied with feeling and that occupied with cognizance and that occupied with ideas are stated. And likewise when anything whatever that is seen or heard or sensed is stated, what is cognized is stated. And the Blessed One said accordingly, Therefore, Bhikkhu, abide contemplating the body as a body, ardent, aware and mindful, guiding out covetousness and grief about the world. Now, ardent here means the energy faculty, aware the understanding faculty, mindful the mindfulness faculty, and guiding out covetousness and grief, the concentration faculty. So when someone abides contemplating the body as a body, the 4 foundations of mindfulness come to fulfillment through keeping in being. For what reason? Because of the 4 faculties state of having a single characteristic. 175. When the four foundations of mindfulness are kept in being, the four right endeavors come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the four right endeavors are kept in being, the four bases for success, roads to power, come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the four bases for success are kept in being, the five faculties, beginning with faith, come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the five faculties are kept in being, the five powers come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the five powers are kept in being, the seven enlightenment factors come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the seven enlightenment factors are kept in being, the noble eight-factored path comes to fulfillment through keeping in being. And all ideas that tend to enlightenment and partake of enlightenment come to fulfillment through keeping in being. For what reason? Because all ideas that tend to enlightenment and partake of enlightenment have a single characteristic, with their characteristic of giving outlet. They come to fulfillment through keeping in being owing to their singleness of characteristic. 176. Also, unprofitable ideas are abandoned and disappear owing to their singleness of characteristic. When the four foundations of mindfulness are kept in being, the perversions are abandoned, the nutriments come to diagnosis, one becomes free from assuming as regards the assumptions, one is unfettered from the bonds, one is dissociated from the ties, one is untainted by the taints, one has crossed over the floods, one is barbless as regards the barbs, the steadying points for consciousness come to one's diagnosis, and one goes no bad way as regards the goings on the bad ways. In this way also one's unprofitable ideas are abandoned and disappear. 177. Or else, wherein a faculty having form, such as the eye, etc., is taught, therein too are taught the form element, the form category, and the form base. 178. Or else, wherein pleasant feeling is taught, therein too are taught the pleasure faculty, the joy faculty, and the origin of suffering as a noble truth. 179. Or else, wherein painful feeling is taught, therein too are taught the pain faculty, the grief faculty, and suffering as a noble truth. 180. Or else, wherein neither painful nor pleasant feeling is taught, therein too are taught the onlooking equanimity faculty, and all dependent arising. For what reason? Because ignorance underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling, with ignorance as condition, determinations, with determinations as condition, consciousness, with consciousness as condition, name and form, with name and form as condition, the sixfold base, with the sixfold base as condition, contact, with contact as condition, feeling, with feeling as condition, craving, with craving as condition, assuming, with assuming as condition, being, with being as condition, birth, with birth as condition, aging and death have actual being, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is how there is an origin to this whole category of suffering. 181. Now this dependent arising can be brought to abandonment by way of that which is on the side of corruption through its being affected by lust, affected by hate, and affected by delusion, and it can be brought to abandonment by way of the noble ideas that are without lust, without hate, and without delusion. 182. In this way, as regards those ideas that have a single characteristic in their function and in their characteristic and in their generality, and also in their death and reappearance, when one of these ideas is stated, the rest of such ideas are also stated. 183. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, when one idea is mentioned, all ideas of like characteristic are mentioned too. This constitutes the mode conveying characteristics. The mode of conveying characteristics is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 6. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a fourfold array. 184. Herein, what is the conveying of a fourfold array? It is this, by way of phrasing, I, the linguistic, 2, the purport, and 3, the teaching source, and 4, the consecutive sequence. This mode conveys a fourfold array, by way of the phrasing, the thread's linguistic, its purport, intention, its source, as the circumstance of its utterance, and its consecutive sequence, should be examined. I, linguistic. 185. Herein, what is the linguistic? It is any language employing terms, any knowledge of ideas by name. 186. For when a bhikkhu knows the name of a meaning and knows the name of an idea, and he applies it accordingly, He is called skilled in meanings and skilled in ideas, skilled in phrasing, skilled in language, skilled in consecutivity syntax, skilled in the teaching, skilled in designations of past tenses, skilled in designations of future tenses, skilled in designations of presently arisen tenses, skilled in designations of the feminine gender, skilled in designations of the masculine gender, skilled in designations of the neuter gender, skilled in designations of the singular number, skilled in designations of the plural number. All regional linguistics and all regional languages can be treated in this way. This is language employing terms. 2. Purport, intent. 187. Herein, what is the purport, intent? Take, for example, the following passage. The true ideal guards him that walks therein, as does a big umbrella in time of rain. The ideal's reward when walked in right is this: who walks therein has no bad destination. What is the Blessed One's purport, intent here? It is that those who desire to be liberated from the states of deprivation will be those who walk in the true idea. This is the Blessed One's purport here. 188. Again, just as a robber taken in housebreaking is haunted by and responsible for his act, so too a man hereafter, when departed, is haunted by and responsible for his act. What is the Blessed One's purport, intent here? It is that when acts have been done by someone's own choice and stored up to be felt, experienced as pain, their unwished for and disagreeable ripening will be coessential with a future state. This is the Blessed One's purport here. 189. Again, who with the rod is cruel to beings that are desirous to find pleasure, shall find no pleasure when departed, for all the pleasure he may seek. What is the Blessed One's purport here? It is that those who would seek pleasure, let them not do evil acts. This is the Blessed One's purport here. 190. Again, a dullard drowsy with much gluttony, engrossed in sleep, who wallows as he lies, like a great porker stuffed with fatting food, comes ever and again back to the world. What is the Blessed One's purport here? It is that those who desire not to be distressed by aging and death will be such as know the right amount in eating, keep the doors of their faculties guarded, are devoted to wakefulness in the first and last of the 3 watches of the night, practice insight with regard to profitable ideas, and respect their companions in the divine life whether elder or new or middle bicus. This is the Blessed One's purport here. 191. Again, the deathless state is diligence, that of mortality, neglect. The diligent will never die, as good as dead the negligent. What is the Blessed One's purport here? It is that those who desire to pursue the search for the deathless will abide diligent. This is the Blessed One's purport here. 3. Source. 192. Herein, what is a source? It is the reason for the utterance of a thread, for example, according as the cattle owner Dhanya said to the Blessed One. A man with children finds relish through his children, and a cattle owner likewise through his cattle. These essentials of existence are a man's relish. Who has them not will never relish find. And as the Blessed One replied, a man with children finds sorrow through his children, and a cattle owner likewise through his cattle. These essentials of existence are a man's sorrow. Who has them not will never sorrow find. Here it is known that with this as circumstance, with this as source, the Blessed One speaks of an external chattel as an essential of existence. 193. And according as, when the evil one, Mara, let fall a large stone from the Vulture Peak rock, the Blessed One said, even if you choose to move, the whole of Vulture Peak, for sure, no fully freed awakened one, would be perturbed on that account. And, were heaven to split, were earth to quake, were all the things that breathe to fear, were you to plunge a dagger in his heart, no wakened one takes shelter in essentials of existence. Here it is known that with this as circumstance, with this as source, the Blessed One speaks of the body as an essential of existence. 194. And according as he said, the steadfast will never call that a strong bond, made of iron or consisting of wood or of thongs, but greed flushed with lusting for jewels and gems, and concern for a wife and for children as well. Here it is known that with this as circumstance, with this as source, the Blessed One speaks of craving for external things. 195. And according as he said, "'Tis these that the steadfast will call a strong bond, which pulls a man down, subtle, hard to get free from, yet this too they sever and wander in freedom, unconcerned, and all sensual pleasures foregone. Here it is known that with this as circumstance, with this as source, the Blessed One speaks of abandoning craving for external things." 196. And according as he said, "This sick impure foul thing, stinking, oozing with carcass exudations, unceasingly by day and night, only a fool could relish it. Here it is known that with this as circumstance, with this as source, the Blessed One speaks of abandoning craving for things in oneself." 197. And according as he said, "Cut off affection for the self, as with the hand an autumn lily, and so pursue the path of peace, the quenching the sublime one taught." Here it is known that, with this as circumstance, with this as a source, the Blessed One speaks of abandoning craving for things in oneself. 4. Consecutive sequence. 198. Herein, what is consecutive sequence? It is according to what the Blessed One said, namely, "Caught in the net of sensual murk, and blocked by craving's bondage, fenced in by fences of neglect, like fishes in a funnel trap, they follow after aging and death, as does the sucking calf its mother. What is stated is craving for sensual desires. What consecutive sequence is that construable by?" 199. It is according as he said, "Who lusts no meaning ever knows, who lust sees never an idea, the murk of darkness laps a man, when he will suffer lust to be." 200. So it is that same craving that is expressed by the terms murk and being caught. And when it is said caught in the net of sensual murk and blocked by craving's bondage, and when it is said who lusts no meaning ever knows, who lust sees never an idea, it is that same craving that is expressed by these terms, which illustrate obsession. 201. The murk is the origin of suffering, and that is the craving that gives renewal of being. 202. And when it is said sensual, this is sensual desire as defilement. And when it is said caught in the net, obsession is shown by those same sensual desires as means. Consequently, craving is called a fence by way of defilement and by way of obsession. It is such as these that follow after aging and death. 203. The following verse, as it is presented by the Blessed One, is given in order to show by what power they follow after aging and death, who has no steadying points, no diversification, who has outstripped the chain and bar beside, not even the world with all its gods can know. The conduct of that stilled one free from craving. 204. The diversifications are craving, views, and conceit, and the determinations thereby actively determined. The steadying points are the underlying tendencies. The chain is obsession by craving, which is the 36 ways explored by the net of craving. The bar is delusion, the determinations determined by the diversifications, and the steadying points and the chain and the bar. Whoever has surmounted all those is called free from craving. 205. Herein, determinations due to obsession can be felt, experienced, here and now in their ripening, or they can be felt on next reappearance, or they can be felt in some subsequent period. So craving gives fruit in three ways, here and now in this existence, or on next reappearance, or in some subsequent period. 206. So the Blessed One said, "Whatever action he does affected out of greed by body or speech or mind, makes his existence coessential with its ripening, either here and now or on next reappearance or in some subsequent period." This is construed with a consecutive sequence of the Blessed One's statements. 207. Herein, obsession is action whose ripening can be felt here and now, or it is action whose ripening can be felt on next reappearance, or it is action whose ripening can be felt in some subsequent period. So action ripens in these three ways, here and now in this existence or on next reappearance or in some subsequent period, according as it is said. 208. And when a fool is one who here kills breathing things, holds wrong view, in consequence he feels the ripening of that here and now or on next reappearance or in some subsequent period. This is construed by a consecutive sequence of the Blessed One's statements. 209. Herein, the obsession is abandonable by means of the power of deliberation, the determinations are abandonable by means of the power of seeing, and the 36 ways explored by craving are abandonable by means of the power of keeping in being. So craving is abandonable in 3 ways. 210. Freedom from craving is the element of extinction with trace left, but with the dissolution of the body it is the element of extinction without trace left. Diversification is what keeping bound together is called. 211. And when the Blessed One says, he diversifies instigated by a past, a future, or a presently arisen form cognizable by the eye. And when the Blessed One says, Radha, do not look back with yearning to past form, do not expectantly relish future form, practice the way to dispassion, fading of lust, ceasing, giving up and relinquishment, as to presently arisen form. This is construed by the consecutivity of the Blessed One's statement. 212. And while the diversifications and the determinations and the relishing of the past, future and presently arisen are a singularity, yet the teaching of the true idea stated by the Blessed One with various other terms, with various other letters, with various other phrases, is of ungauged meaning. 213. That is how the thread is demonstrated by collating thread with thread, adding the sequence together by consecutivity. 4 kinds of consecutive sequence. 214. Now this consecutive sequence is of 4 kinds: meaning sequence, phrasing sequence, teaching sequence, and demonstration sequence. 215. Herein, meaning sequence is the 6 terms, namely explaining, displaying, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, and describing. 216. 2. Phrasing sequence is the 6 terms, namely letter, term, phrase, mood, language, and demonstration. 217. 3. Teaching sequence. He does not meditate with earth as support, and yet he meditates as a meditator. He does not meditate with water, fire, air. The base consisting of infiniteness of space. The base consisting of infiniteness of consciousness. The base consisting of no owning. The base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception. He does not meditate with this world or the other as support, and yet he meditates as a meditator. And what is in between both, the seen, heard, sensed, cognized, reached, sought, thought, explored, and cogitated over with the mind, he does not meditate with that as support too, and yet he meditates as a meditator. In the world with its gods, its maras, and its high divinities, in this generation with its monks and divines, its princes and men, when one such as this meditates with cognizance unsupported, he is not known. Just as Mara the evil one, seeking the clansman Ghatika's consciousness, neither knew nor saw it, for with the abandoning of craving he had gone past diversification, and he had no more support for views. And as Ghatika, so too Vakali. When such as these are meditating with unsupported cognizance, they are not known by the world with its gods, its maras, and its high divinities, by this generation with its monks and divines, its princes and men. This is teaching sequence. 218. For herein what is demonstration sequence? Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the unprofitable side. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the profitable side. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of corruption. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of cleansing. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the occurrence of the roundabout. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the non-occurrence of the roundabout. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of craving and ignorance. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of quiet and insight. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of consciencelessness and shamelessness. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of conscience and shame. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of unmindfulness and unawareness. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of mindfulness and awareness. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of what is no reason and by means of unreasoned attention. And those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of what is a reason and by means of reasoned attention. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of idleness and difficult admonishability. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of instigation of energy and easy admonishability. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of faithlessness and negligence. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of faith and diligence. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of hearing what is not the true object of faith and by means of non-restraint. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the true object of faith and by means of restraint. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of covetousness and ill will. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of non-covetousness and non-ill will. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the hindrances and the fetters. Those with unsupported cognizance by means of the heart deliverance due to fading of lust and by means of the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. Those with supported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the annihilation view and by means of the eternity view. Those with unsupported cognizance can be demonstrated by means of the element of extinction with trace left and the element of extinction without trace left. This is demonstration sequence 219. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, by way of phrasing the linguistic, the purport and the teaching source, and the consecutive sequence, this mode conveys a fourfold array. The mode of conveying a fourfold array is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter-demonstrative subsection. Continued. 7. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a conversion. 220. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a conversion? It is this, the mode that, when there is one footing, searches for a footing that remains, and then converts the opposites. Is that conveying a conversion? 221. Instigate yourselves, launch out, devote yourselves in the enlightened one's dispensation. Scatter the armies of mortality, as does an elephant a hut of reeds. The words, instigate yourselves, launch out, are the footing for energy. The words, devote yourselves in the enlightened one's dispensation, are the footing for concentration. The words, scatter the armies of mortality as does an elephant a hut of reeds, are the footing for understanding. The words, instigate yourselves, launch out, are the footing for the energy faculty. The words, devote yourselves in the enlightened one's dispensation, are the footing for the concentration faculty. The words, scatter the armies of mortality as does an elephant a hut of reeds, are the footing for the understanding faculty. These footings constitute the teaching, beginning with instigate yourselves. 222. The instigation is for creatures who are either already devoting themselves, or who are not yet devoting themselves. 223. Herein, those not yet devoting themselves do not devote themselves owing to their being rooted in negligence. That negligence is of two kinds, rooted in craving and rooted in ignorance. 224. Herein, as to that negligence rooted in ignorance, such negligence as is shut in by such unknowing that it does not understand how the five categories are inseparable from the idea of arising and subsidence is rooted in negligence. Such negligence rooted in craving is of three kinds. I. When someone seeks for the arising of unarisen properties, he falls into negligence. And when he seeks, 2. The sign of preservation, and 3. The sign of use of the arisen properties, he falls into negligence. These are the four kinds of negligence in the world. 1 kind due to ignorance and 3 kinds due to craving. 225. Herein, the name body is the footing for ignorance, and the form body is the footing for craving. Why is that? In the kinds of being existence, having form there is cleaving to them, and in the formless kinds of being existence, there is confusion about them. 226. Herein, the form body is the form category, and the name body is the four formless categories. 227. With assumption in virtue of what is it that the five are categories of assumption? In virtue of craving and ignorance. 228. Herein, craving is 2 kinds of assumption, namely sensual desire assumption and virtue and duty assumption, while ignorance is 2 kinds of assumption, namely view assumption and self-doctrine assumption. 229. Any categories of assumption, so-called in virtue of these 4 kinds of assumption, are suffering. The Blessed One teaches the true idea for the respective diagnosis and abandoning of them, for the diagnosis of suffering and the abandoning of its origin. 230. Herein, any one of the 3 kinds of negligence rooted in craving, 1. seeks for the arising of unarisen properties, and 2 works for the preservation, and 3 the sign of use of the arisen properties. 231. Quiet guards against and prevents that negligence by means of full penetration. How is that? When one knows, in the case of sensual desires, the gratification is gratification, the disappointment as disappointment, the escape as escape, and also degradation, corruption, and cleansing, and the benefits of renunciation, then any inquiry, any scrutiny therein is insight. These 2 ideas come to fulfillment through keeping in being, that is to say quiet and insight. When these 2 ideas are kept in being, 2 ideas are abandoned, namely craving and ignorance. When these 2 ideas are abandoned, the 4 kinds of assuming cease. With cessation of assuming, cessation of being. With cessation of being, cessation of birth. With cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief and despair. That is how there is a cessation to this whole category of suffering. 232. So there are the first 2 truths, namely suffering and origin, and quiet and insight are the path, and cessation of being is extinction. These are the 4 truths. That is why the Blessed One said, instigate yourselves, launch out. 233. Just as a tree, though felled, sprouts up again, as long as firm its root is and intact, so too this pain springs ever and anon, with tendency to craving unimpaired. This is the underlying tendency to craving. To what kind of craving? To craving for being existence. The condition for that idea is ignorance. For it is with ignorance as condition that there is craving for being existence. These are the 2 defilements, namely craving and ignorance. And these are the 4 kinds of assumption. 234. Any categories of assumption, so-called in virtue of these 4 kinds of assumption, are suffering. The 4 kinds of assumption are origin, while the 5 categories are the suffering. The Blessed One teaches the true idea for their respective diagnosis and abandoning. For the diagnosis of suffering and the abandoning of origin. 235. That whereby one eradicates the underlying tendency to craving is quiet. That whereby one shuts off ignorance, the condition for the underlying tendency to craving is insight. These 2 ideas come to fulfillment through keeping in being, namely quiet and insight. 236. Herein, the fruit of quiet is the heart deliverance due to fading of lust. The fruit of insight is the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. 237. So there are the first 2 truths, namely suffering and its origin, and quiet and insight are the path, and the 2 kinds of deliverance are cessation. These are the 4 truths. That is why the Blessed One said, just as a tree. 238. No doing any kind of evil, perfecting profitable skill, and purifying one's own heart. This is the Buddha's dispensation. What is called any kind of evil is the 3 kinds of misconduct, namely bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct. These are the 10 unprofitable courses of action, namely killing breathing things, taking what is not given, and misconduct in sensual desires. False speech, malicious speech, harsh speech and gossip, and covetousness, ill will and wrong view. 239. These are 2 kinds of action, namely choice and concomitant of cognizance. 240. Herein, killing breathing things, malicious speech and harsh speech are molded by hate. Taking what is not given, misconduct in sensual desires, and false speech are molded by greed, and gossip is molded by delusion. These 7 kinds of acting are action as choice. 241. Covetousness is greed as a root of the unprofitable. Ill will is hate as a root of the unprofitable. Wrong view is the wrong path. These 3 kinds of acting are action as concomitant of cognizance. That is why it was said action as choice and action as concomitant of cognizance. 242. When a root of the unprofitable comes to expression by the means consisting of body or speech, it comes to expression as one of the 4 bad ways, namely those through will, hate, fear, or delusion. 243. Herein, when it comes to expression as the bad way through will, it is molded by greed. When it comes to expression as the bad way through hate, it is molded by hate. When it comes to expression as the bad ways through fear and delusion, it is molded by delusion. 244. Herein, greed is abandoned by means of contemplating ugliness, hate by means of loving kindness, and delusion by means of understanding. Likewise, Greed is abandoned by means of onlooking equanimity, and hate by means of loving kindness and compassion, and delusion is abandoned and disappears by means of sympathetic gladness. That is why the Blessed One said, "No doing any kind of evil." 245. And what is called any kind of evil is the 8 wrongnesses, namely wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. These are called any kind of evil. Any non-affecting, non-doing, non-practicing of these 8 wrongnesses is called no doing any kind of evil. 246. When the 8 wrongnesses are abandoned, the 8 rightnesses reach excellence, sampajanti. Any affecting of, producing excellence in, sampadana. The 8 rightnesses is called perfecting, upasampada, profitable skill. 247. And purifying one's own heart is the affecting, keeping in being of the ancient path. It is mindfulness of that. When the heart is purified, the categories become purified. That is why the Blessed One said, Bhikkhus, a divine life is lived under a perfect one for the purpose of purification of the heart. 248. The purifying is of 2 kinds, namely the abandoning of hindrances and the eradication of underlying tendencies. Also there are 2 planes of purifying, namely the plane of seeing and the plane of keeping in being. 249. Herein, that by the penetration of which one purifies is suffering. That from which one purifies is the origin. That by which one purifies is the path. And that which is purified is cessation. These are the 4 truths. Hence the Blessed One said, no doing any kind of evil. 250. The true idea guards him that walks therein, as does a big umbrella in time of rain. The ideal's reward when walked in right is this: who walks therein has no bad destination. What is called the true idea is of 2 kinds, namely 1 faculty restraint and 2 the path. A bad destination is of 2 kinds as follows. Compared with gods and human beings, the states of unease are a bad destination. But compared with extinction, all kinds of reappearance are a bad destination. 251. 1. Herein, in the case of virtue as restraint, there is the keeping of it untorn, and this true idea when walked in right guards one from the states of unease. Accordingly the Blessed One said, Bhikkhus, there are 2 kinds of destination for one who is virtuous, the gods and human beings. And accordingly the Gma Asabandhaputta said to the Blessed One in the town of Nalanda, Venerable Sir, there are divines of the West Country, who use a kamalu, ascetic's drinking vessel, who wear water-weed garlands, who morning and evening go down to the water and who worship fires. When someone is deceased and dead they cajole and coerce him, trying to get him a footing in heaven. Now, Venerable Sir, is the Blessed One capable of so doing that all the world, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappears in a good destination, in the heavenly world? As to that, Gma, I shall ask you a question in return. Answer it as you like. How do you conceive this, Gma? Here a man might be a killer of breathing things, a taker of what is not given, misconduct in sensual desires, a speaker of falsehood, a malicious speaker, a harsh speaker, a gossip, covetous, with ill will in his heart and wrong in his view. Then a large body of people met and forgathered, and they begged and implored and beseeched with hands extended palms together, Oh, let this man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappear in a good destination, in the heavenly world. How do you conceive this, Gma, because of that large body of people's begging, because of their imploring, because of their beseeching with hands extended palms together, would that man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappear in a happy destination in the heavenly world? No, Venerable Sir. Gma, suppose a man threw a big solid stone into a deep pool of water, and then a large body of people met and forgathered, and they begged and they implored and they beseeched with hands extended palms together, O sirs, let the solid stone emerge. O sirs, let the solid stone float up. O sirs, let the solid stone float to dry land. How do you conceive this, Gma, because of their begging, because of their imploring, because of their beseeching with hands extended palms together? Would that solid stone emerge? Would it float up? Would it float to dry land? No, Venerable Sir. So too, Gma, when a man is a killer of breathing things, and wrong in his view, for all that a large body of people might meet and foregather and might beg and implore and beseech with hands extended palms together, oh let this man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappear in a good destination, in the heavenly world. Yet that man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, might reappear in a state of unease, in a bad destination, in perdition, in hell. How do you conceive this, Gma? Here a man might have abstained from killing breathing things, right in his view. Then a large body of people met and foregathered and they begged and implored and beseeched with hands extended palms together, oh let this man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappear in a state of unease, in a bad destination, in perdition, in hell. How do you conceive this, Gma, because of that large body of people's begging, because of their imploring, because of their beseeching with hands extended palms together, would that man, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in a state of unease, in a bad destination, in perdition, in hell? No, venerable sir. Gma, suppose a man sank a ghee pot or an oil pot in a deep water pool, and fixed it so that any sand or gravel there might be in it would go to the bottom and any ghee or oil there might be in it would go to the top. And then a large body of people met and foregathered and they begged and implored and beseeched with hands extended palms together, O sirs, let the ghee, the oil sink. Oh, sirs, let the ghee, the oil go down. How do you conceive this, Gma, because of that large body of people's begging, because of their imploring, because of their beseeching with hands extended palms together? Would that ghee, that oil sink down, go down? No, venerable sir. So too, Gma, when a man abstains from killing breathing things, right in his view, for all that a large body of people might meet and foregather and might beg and implore and beseech with hands extended palms together, oh let this man, on the dissolution of the body, after death, reappear in a state of unease, in a bad destination, in perdition, in hell. Yet that man, on the dissolution of the body after death, might reappear in a good destination, in the heavenly world. So it is this true idea that, when walked in right, guards one from the states of unease. 252. 2. Herein, it is the keenness, the outstandingness of the path that is the true idea which, when walked in right, guards one from all kinds of reappearing. Accordingly, the Blessed One said, so let his cognizance be guarded, having for pasture right intention, giving right view first place through knowing, rise and fall, transcending drowsing, and lethargy the bhikkhu may, abandon all bad destinations. 253. Herein, the cause of the bad destinations is craving and ignorance. These are the 4 kinds of assuming. 254. Any categories of assuming, so-called in virtue of these 4 kinds of assuming, are suffering. The 4 kinds of assuming are origin, while the 5 categories are suffering. The Blessed One teaches the true idea for their respective diagnosis and abandoning, for the diagnosis of suffering and for the abandoning of its origin. 255. Herein, the 5 faculties that have form are the footing for craving, while the mind faculty is the footing for ignorance. 256. One who guards the 5 faculties that have form keeps concentration in being and Dieter's craving, while one who guards the mind faculty keeps insight in being and Dieter's ignorance. 257. With the deterrence of craving, 2 kinds of assuming are abandoned, namely sensual desire assuming and virtue and duty assuming, while with the deterrence of ignorance 2 kinds of assuming are abandoned, namely view assuming and self-doctrine assuming. 258. When the 4 kinds of assuming are abandoned, 2 ideas come to fulfillment through keeping in being, namely quiet and insight. This is called the divine life. 259. Herein, the fruit of the divine life is the 4 fruits of the monk state, namely the fruit of stream entry, fruit of once return, fruit of non-return, and the highest fruit, which is arahantship. These are the 4 fruits of the divine life. 260. So there are the first 2 truths, namely suffering and its origin, and quiet and insight and the divine life are the path. And the fruits of the divine life and the undetermined element, which is the object of these, are cessation. These are the 4 truths. That is why the Blessed One said, the true idea guards. 261. Herein, that by the penetration of which it guards is suffering, that from which it guards is origin, that by which it guards is the path, and that which guards is cessation. These are the 4 truths. 262. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, the mode that, when there is one footing, searches for a footing that remains, and then converts the opposites. Is that conveying a conversion? The mode conveying a conversion is ended. The guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 8. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying an analysis. 263. Herein, what is the mode of conveying an analysis? It is this. It analyses idea, footing, plane of types of men, the shared and unshared. This mode should be known as that conveying analysis. 264. The two kinds of thread, namely that dealing with morality and that dealing with penetration, are the two ways, namely that dealing with merit and that dealing with the fruit of the divine life, which are the two kinds of virtue, namely virtue as restraint and virtue as abandoning. 265. Herein, it is for the purpose of the way dealing with merit that the Blessed One teaches a thread dealing with morality. He who needs this kind of teaching is steadied by it in virtue as restraint, and he is one who lives the divine life by that kind of divine life. 266. Herein, it is for the purpose of the way dealing with the fruit of the divine life that the Blessed One teaches a thread dealing with penetration. He who needs this kind of teaching is steadied by it in virtue as abandoning, and he is one who lives the divine life by that kind of divine life. 267. Herein, what is a thread dealing with morality? A thread dealing with morality is this: talk on giving, talk on virtue, talk on heaven and the disappointment in sensual desires and the benefits in renunciation. 268. Herein, what is a thread dealing with penetration? A thread dealing with penetration is this: any displaying of the four truths. 269. In a thread dealing with morality there is no act of understanding, there is no path, there is no fruit of the path. In a thread dealing with penetration there is the act of understanding, there is the path, there is the fruit of the path. 270. These are two of the first four types of thread, which should, after being in all ways, in so far as the plane of knowledge extends. 271. 1. Herein, what kinds of ideas are shared in common? Two kinds of ideas are shared in common, namely shared in common by a name and shared in common by a thing or person or also any other such kind. 272. Defilements to be abandoned by seeing are common to ordinary men, whether they are creatures certain of wrongness or those not thus certain. Lust for sensual desires and ill will are common to the ordinary man and to the stream enterer. The further side fetters are common to the ordinary man and to the non-returner. Any attainment belonging to the worlds that an initiate noble disciple attains is common to him and to those without lust. For ideas shared in common remain thus each within the successive limits of their own provinces, and the type of person possessed of any one of these ideas does not, as such, surpass the limit set by any such idea. These kinds of ideas are shared in common. 273. Herein, what kinds of ideas are not shared in common has to be examined as to whether the teaching is about initiates or adepts, in the case of noble persons, or those capable or incapable of enlightenment in this life, in the case of ordinary men. 274. Lust for sensual desires and ill will are common to the stream enterer standing upon the path and to the ordinary man, but the essential nature of the idea of stream entry is not common to both. And the further side fetters are common to the non-returner standing upon that path and to those below him, but the essential nature of the idea of non-return is not common to both. The name, initiate, is common to all the 7 kinds of initiate, but the essential nature of the idea of each kind is not common to the rest. The name, on the way, is common to all the 4 kinds of those on the way of their respective paths, but the essential nature of the idea of each kind is not common to all the rest. Initiate's virtue is common to all kinds of initiate, but the essential nature of the idea of each kind is not common to the rest. That is how it has to be examined according to the inferior, superior, and medium by one who sees the distinctions. 275. 2. The plane of seeing is 3. The footing for finding a footing in certainty. 2. The plane of keeping in being is 3. The footing for the reaching of the higher fruits. The painful way with sluggish acquaintanceship is the footing for quiet. The pleasant way with swift acquaintanceship is the footing for insight. The ground for making merit consisting in giving is the footing shared in common. For hearing about the true idea from another's utterance. The ground for making merit consisting in virtue is the footing shared in common. For understanding consisting in cogitation. The ground for making merit consisting in keeping in being is the footing shared in common. For understanding consisting in keeping in being. The ground for making merit consisting in giving is the footing shared in common. For hearing about the true idea from another's utterance and for understanding consisting in what is heard. The ground for making merit consisting in virtue is the footing shared in common. For understanding consisting in cogitation and for reasoned attention. The ground for making merit consisting in keeping in being is the footing shared in common. For understanding consisting in keeping in being and for right view. Living in befitting places is the footing shared in common. For seclusion and for concentration. Waiting on true men is the footing shared in common. For the three kinds of confidence due to undergoing and for quiet. Right disposition in self-guidance is the footing shared in common. For conscience and for insight. Giving up the unprofitable is the footing shared in common. For inquiry into the profitable and for the concentration faculty. The well-proclaimedness of the true idea is the footing shared in common. For the planting of the profitable root and for the attainment of the fruits of the paths. The communities having progressed by the good way is the footing shared in common. For the community's goodness. The excellence of the master is the footing shared in common. For instilling confidence in the unconfident and for strengthening the already confident. The state of not having resisted the Padamaka rule is the footing shared in common. For the deterrence of contumacious persons and for the comfort of pious persons. 276. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, it analyses idea, footing, plane of types of men, the shared and unshared. This mode should be known as that conveying analysis. The mode conveying an analysis is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter-demonstrative subsection. Continued. 9. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a reversal. 277. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a reversal? It is this, that into opposites reversing, ideas of profit and unprofit, shown to be kept in being and left, is called the mode conveying reversal. 278. In a mature person with right view, wrong view is abolished, and the many unprofitable ideas that might arise in him with wrong view for their condition are also abolished in him, and the many profitable ideas that gain actual being with right view for their condition come to perfection in him through keeping in being. In a mature person with right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right deliverance. In a mature person with right knowing and seeing of deliverance, wrong knowing and seeing of deliverance is abolished, and the many evil and profitable ideas that might arise in him with wrong knowing and seeing of deliverance for their condition are also abolished in him, and the many profitable ideas that gain actual being with right knowing and seeing of deliverance for their condition come to perfection in him through keeping in being. 279. Killing of breathing things has been abandoned in one who abstains from killing breathing things. Taking what is not given has been abandoned in one who abstains from taking what is not given. What is not the divine life has been abandoned in one who lives the divine life. False speech has been abandoned in one who speaks truth. Malicious speech has been abandoned in one who speaks unmaliciously. Harsh speech has been abandoned in one who speaks in a timely manner. Covetousness has been abandoned in one who is uncovetous. Ill will has been abandoned in one who has no cognizance of ill will. Wrong view has been abandoned in one who has right view. 280. If there are any who censure the eight-factored path, then from their assertions certain legitimate deductions to be seen for oneself come up which are censurable as follows. 281. For when those worthy ones censure the idea of right view, the consequence is that those who have wrong view must be honored and praised by those worthy ones. For when those worthy ones censure the idea of right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right deliverance, For when those worthy ones censure the idea of right knowing and seeing of deliverance, the consequence is that those who have wrong knowing and seeing of deliverance must be honored and praised by those worthy ones. 282. And if there are any who say sensual desires should be enjoyed, sensual desires should be rejoiced in, sensual desires should be repeated, sensual desires should be used, sensual desires should be kept in being, sensual desires should be made much of, then abstention from sensual desires is not the true idea according to them. Or if there are any who say the true idea is devotion to self-torment, then the true idea that is the outlet is not the true idea according to them. And if there are any who say the true idea is painful, then the true idea that is pleasant is not the true idea according to them. 283. According as a bhikkhu's perception of beauty in all determinations is abandoned when he abides contemplating ugliness, according as his perception of pleasure is abandoned when he abides contemplating pain, according as his perception of permanence is abandoned when he abides contemplating impermanence, and according as his perception of self is abandoned when he abides contemplating not self, then whatever idea he elects or approves, thereby he has implicated the contrary opposite of any such idea as unwished for. 284. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said that into opposites reversing, ideas of profit and unprofit, shown to be kept in being and left, is called the mode conveying reversal. The mode of conveying a reversal is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 10. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying synonyms. 285. Herein, what is the mode of conveying synonyms? It is this: knower of threads is he that knows how many synonyms for one idea there are in the thread. This mode is that conveying synonyms. 286. According as the Blessed One demonstrates a single idea by means of many synonyms. For example, need and longing, expectant relishing, enticements on the several elements based, hankering whose being is rooted in unknowing. To all that with its root I put an end. 287. What is called need, asa, is any longing, sisan, for a benefit about to be. Need arises in one thus, surely it will come. 288. What is called longing is any aspiration for a presently arisen benefit, or else, on seeing someone better, longing arises in one thus, may I be like that. 289. Fostering the production of a benefit is what is called expectant relishing, or one expects thus a dear relative, or one expects thus a dear idea, or one expects something thus as unrepulsive. 290. The several elements are the eye element, form element, and eye consciousness element, ear element, sound element, and ear consciousness element, nose element, odor element, and nose consciousness element, tongue element, flavor element, and tongue consciousness element, body element, tangible element, and body consciousness element, mind element, idea element, and mind consciousness element. 291. Enticements. Some believe in forms, some believe in sounds, some believe in odors, some believe in flavors, some believe in tangibles, some believe in ideas. 292. Herein the 24 terms, namely the 6 kinds of grief with the house life as support, the 6 kinds of joy with the house life as support, the 6 kinds of grief with renunciation as support, the 6 kinds of joy with renunciation as support, being on the side belonging to craving, are synonyms for craving. But the 6 kinds of onlooking equanimity with the house life as support are on the side belonging to views. That same onlooking equanimity in the mood of aspiration as relishing of the true idea, love of the true idea, cleaving to the true idea, is synonymous with craving. 293. Cognizance, mind, and consciousness are synonyms for cognizance. 294. Mind faculty, mind element, mind base, and act of being conscious are synonyms for mind. Understanding faculty, understanding power, training in the higher understanding, understanding category, investigation of ideas, enlightenment factor, knowledge, right view, judgment, insight, knowledge about an idea, knowledge about a meaning, knowledge about an inference, knowledge about exhaustion, knowledge about non-arising. The I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, the final knowing faculty, the final knower faculty, vision, I, science, discovery, breadth, wit, light, or also any other such kind. These are synonyms for understanding. 295. All the five faculties, when disjoined from worlds, are understanding. Furthermore, faith has the sense of dominance, energy the sense of instigation, mindfulness the sense of non-floating away from its object, concentration the sense of non-distraction, and understanding the sense of active understanding. 296. And as it is said in the recollection of the enlightened one, that blessed one is such since he is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in science and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and men, enlightened, blessed. And further, he who has come to produce the powers, reached the kinds of intrepidity, arrived at the discriminations, left behind the four bonds, passed beyond going the bad ways, extracted the barbs, cured the wounds, crushed the thorns, remedied the obsessions, outstripped the tether, unknotted the ties, passed beyond inclination, disrupted darkness. Who is the possessor of eyesight, who has surmounted the worldly ideas, who is dissociated from favoring and opposing among wished-for and unwished-for ideas, who has no recourse to amassing, who has passed beyond the tether, who is done with battling, who is the most eminent, who is the torch-bearer, light-maker, illuminator, gloom-dispeller, conflict-abandoner, measureless in qualities, immense in qualities, incalculable in qualities, maker of radiance, maker of irradiance, illuminator of the true ideal, enlightened, blessed. These are synonyms for the recollection of the enlightened one. 297. And as it is said in the recollection of the true idea is well proclaimed by the blessed one, to be seen for oneself, not delayed, timeless, inviting inspection, onward leading, and directly experienceable by the wise. That is to say, the disillusionment of vanity, the outguiding of thirst, the elimination of reliance, the termination of the round, the void, the very hard to get, the exhaustion of craving, fading, cessation, extinction, and further, the undetermined, the infinite, and the untainted, the truth, the further shore, the subtle, very hard to see, the ageless, everlasting, and unworn away, making no showing, undiversifying, peace, the deathless, the supreme, the blissful, and the safe, exhaustion of thirst, the wonderful, the marvelous, the unplagued, whose nature it is to be unplagued. Extinction, this is what the sublime one taught, the unborn and the unbrought to being, the hazard-free, the unmade, and the sorrowless, the sorrow-free, the unmenaced, whose nature it is to be unmenaced. Extinction, this is what the sublime one taught, profound and very hard to see as well, surpassing too and unsurpassed, that is unlike, that has no like, foremost and best as it is called, shield, shelter, without conflict, without blemish, spotless, immaculate as it is called, the lamp isle, and bliss, the immense, the standing point, non-owning, non-diversifying called. These are synonyms for the recollection of the true idea. 298. And as it is said in the recollection of the community of the Blessed One's hearers has progressed by the good way, the community of the Blessed One's hearers has progressed by the straight way, the community of the Blessed One's hearers has progressed by the true way, the community of the Blessed One's hearers has progressed by the proper way, that is to say, the 4 pairs of men, the 8 types of mature persons. This community of the Blessed One's hearers is fit for gifts, fit for hospitality, fit for offerings, fit for reverential salutation, as the incomparable field of merit for the world. And further, perfect in virtue, perfect in concentration, perfect in deliverance, perfect in knowing and seeing of deliverance. It is creature's core, creature's fine essence, creature's fine extract, creature's pillar, creature's blossom of fragrance, to be honored by gods and human beings. These are synonyms for the recollection of the community. 299. And just as it is said in the recollection of virtue, those kinds of virtue that are untorn, unrent, unblotched, unmodelled, noble, desired by noble ones, liberating, commended by the wise, not misapprehended and conducive to concentration. And further, virtue as an ornament for adorning the topmost limb, and virtue as a treasure laid by in the sense of surmounting all defects, and virtue as an archer's craft for hitting the bull's eye, and virtue as a rule in the sense of non-transgression, and virtue as wealth of corn in the sense of terminating poverty, and virtue as a looking glass for the purpose of surveying ideas of quiet and insight, and virtue as a storied palace in the sense of a place for surveying, and virtue that by its having parallel occurrence with all the four planes, ends in the deathless. These are synonyms for the recollection of virtue. 300. And as it is said in the recollection of generosity, on an occasion on which a noble hearer lives in a house, freely generous, open-handed, delighting in relinquishing, used to being asked, and delighting in giving and sharing. These are synonyms for the recollection of generosity. 301. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, "Knower of threads is he that knows." How many synonyms for one idea there are in the thread, this mode? Is that conveying synonyms? The mode of conveying synonyms is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 11. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying descriptions. 302. Herein, what is the mode of conveying descriptions? It is this. The blessed one idea teaches. By means of manifold descriptions. This mood can thus be known to be the mode that does convey descriptions. 303. Any teaching by explanatory talk about the nature of anything is a description, in terms of presentation. And what is the teaching as explanatory talk about the nature of anything? It is the four truths, according as the Blessed One said. This is suffering. This is a description. It is a description in terms of presentation applied to the 5 categories, the 6 elements, the 18 elements, the 12 bases, and the 10 faculties. 304. Because if there is lust, if there is relish, if there is craving for physical nutriment, their consciousness finds a steadying point and develops. Wherever consciousness finds a steadying point and develops, there is the finding of a footing for name and form. Wherever there is the finding of a footing for name and form, there is maturing of determinations. Wherever there is maturing of determinations, their renewed being is made to occur in the future. Wherever renewed being is made to occur in the future, there is future birth, aging and death. Wherever there is future birth, aging and death that is accompanied by sorrow, bicus, accompanied by trouble, accompanied by despair, I say. If there is lust for contact, despair. If there is lust for mind choice, despair. If there is lust for consciousness, despair. 305. This is description in terms of giving being applied to suffering and to its origin. 306. By his, if there is no lust, if there is no relish, if there is no craving for physical nutriment, their consciousness does not find a steadying point or develop. Wherever consciousness does not find a steadying point or develop, there is no finding of a footing for name and form. Wherever there is no finding of a footing for name and form, there is no maturing of determinations. Wherever there is no maturing of determinations, there no renewal of being is made to occur in the future. Wherever no renewal of being is made to occur in the future, there is no future birth, aging and death. Wherever there is no future birth, aging and death, that is sorrowless, bicus, untroubled and free from despair, I say. If there is no lust for contact, free from despair. If there is no lust for mind choice, free from despair. If there is no lust for consciousness, free from despair. 307. This is a description in terms of diagnosis applied to suffering, a description in terms of abandoning applied to origin, a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of verification applied to cessation. 308. Bhikkhus maintain concentration in being. A bhikkhu who is diligent, prudent, mindful, concentrated, understands how things are. And how does he understand how things are? The I is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Forms are impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. I consciousness is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. I contact is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Whatever is felt, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant that arises with eye contact for its condition, that too is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. The ear is impermanent. Sounds are impermanent. The nose is impermanent. Odors are impermanent. The tongue is impermanent. Flavors are impermanent. The body is impermanent. Tangibles are impermanent. The mind is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Ideas are impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Mind consciousness is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Mind contact is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. Whatever is felt, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, that arises with mind contact for its condition, that too is impermanent. That is how he understands how it is. 309. This is a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of diagnosis applied to suffering, a description in terms of abandoning applied to origin, a description in terms of verification applied to cessation. 310. Dispense with form, radha, shatter it, put it out of play by means of understanding, practice the way to exhaustion of craving. With exhaustion of craving there is exhaustion of suffering. With exhaustion of suffering there is extinction. Dispense with feeling. Dispense with perception. Dispense with determinations. Dispense with consciousness, shatter it, put it out of play, by means of understanding, practice the way to exhaustion of craving. With exhaustion of craving there is exhaustion of suffering. With exhaustion of suffering there is extinction. 311. This is a description in terms of cessation applied to cessation, a description in terms of dispassion applied to gratification, a description in terms of diagnosis applied to suffering, a description in terms of abandoning applied to origin, a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of verification applied to cessation. 312. This is suffering. That is how he understands how it is. This is the origin of suffering. That is how he understands how it is. This is the cessation of suffering. That is how he understands how it is. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That is how he understands how it is. 313. This is a description in terms of penetration applied to the truths, a description in terms of presentation applied to the plane of seeing, a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of verification applied to the fruit of stream entry. 314. These are taints. That is how he understands how it is. This is the origin of taints. That is how he understands how it is. This is the cessation of taints. That is how he understands how it is. This is the way leading to the cessation of taints. That is how he understands how it is. 315. This is a description in terms of arising applied to knowledge of exhaustion, a description in terms of opportunity applied to knowledge of non-arising, a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of diagnosis applied to suffering, a description in terms of abandoning applied to origin, a description in terms of instigation applied to the energy faculty, a description in terms of removal applied to grubs, a description in terms of presentation, applied to the plane of keeping and being, a description in terms of counteraction applied to evil and profitable ideas. 316. This is suffering. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. This is the origin of suffering. Such. This is the cessation of suffering. Such. This is the way leading to cessation of suffering. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. 317. This is a description in terms of teaching applied to the truths, a description in terms of presentation applied to understanding consisting in what is heard, a description in terms of verification applied to the I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, a description in terms of setting rolling, making occur, applied to the wheel blessing of the true idea. 318. This suffering must be diagnosed. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. This origin of suffering must be abandoned. Such. This cessation of suffering must be verified. Such. This way leading to the cessation of suffering must be kept in being. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. 319. This is a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of presentation applied to understanding consisting in cogitation, a description in terms of verification applied to the final knowing faculty. 320. This suffering has been diagnosed. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. This origin of suffering has been abandoned. Such, this cessation of suffering has been verified. Such, this way leading to the cessation of suffering has been kept in being. Such was the vision, the knowledge, the understanding, the science, the light, that arose in regard to ideas not heard by me before. 321. This is a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path, a description in terms of presentation applied to understanding consisting in keeping and being, a description in terms of verification applied to the final knower faculty, a description in terms of setting rolling applied to the wheel of the true idea. 322. The stilled one dropped the being determinate, that gives existence measured and unmeasured, and happy in himself and concentrated. He sundered, like a mail coat, self-existence. 323. Measured is the determination's element. Unmeasured is the extinction element. That gives existence measured and unmeasured is a description in terms of acquaintanceship applied to all ideas, a description in terms of presentation applied to the discrimination of ideas. 324. The stilled one dropped the being determinate is a description in terms of giving up applied to origin, a description in terms of diagnosis applied to suffering. 325. And happy in himself and concentrated is a description in terms of keeping and being applied to mindfulness occupied with the body, a description in terms of steadiness applied to unification of cognizance. 326. He sundered, like a mail coat, self-existence, is a description in terms of breaking out applied to cognizance, a description in terms of assuming applied to omniscience, a description in terms of bursting open applied to the eggshell of ignorance. That is why the Blessed One said, the stilled one dropped the being determinate, that gives existence measured and unmeasured. 327. How could a man to sensual desires stoop? Who pain has seen and that wherefrom it sources? Who knows they make for clinging in the world? Should mindful train in guiding them away. 328. Who pain is a description in terms of a synonym applied to pain, suffering, and it is a description in terms of diagnosis applied to it. 329. And that wherefrom it sources is a description in terms of giving being applied to origin, and it is a description in terms of abandoning applied to it. 330. Has seen is a description in terms of a synonym applied to the eye of knowledge, and it is a description in terms of penetration applied to it. 331. How could a man to sensual desires stoop is a description in terms of sensual desires applied to craving for sensual desires, and it is a description in terms of insistence applied to it. 332. Who knows they make for clinging in the world is a description in terms of seeing an enemy applied to sensual desires. For sensual desires have the simile of a pit of coals, the simile of a lump of flesh, are like a conflagration, and have the similes of a chasm and a serpent's head. 333. Mindful them is a description in terms of dispersal applied to abandoning, a description in terms of presentation applied to mindfulness occupied with the body, and a description in terms of keeping and being applied to the path. 334. Should train in guiding away is a description in terms of penetration applied to outguiding of lust, outguiding of hate, and outguiding of delusion. 335. A man is a description in terms of a synonym applied to a devotee. 336. Now when a devotee understands that they make for clinging, then without the arising of sensual desires he arouses profitable ideas. He makes efforts for the arising of unarisen profitable ideas. This is a description in terms of effort applied to the reaching of the as yet unreached, a description in terms of presentation applied to discontent with what deals with the hither side. 337. Herein, he makes efforts for the steadiness of arisen profitable ideas. This is a description in terms of diligence applied to keeping and being, a description in terms of presentation applied to the energy faculty, a description in terms of preservation applied to profitable ideas, a description in terms of steadiness applied to the training in the higher cognizance. That is why the Blessed One said, how could a man to sensual desires stoop? Who pain has seen and that wherefrom it sources. 338. The world is held in bondage by delusion, and only looks as though 'twere capable. Wrapped in bewilderment a fool is held, in bondage by essentials of existence. To him who sees it will appear devoid of features, he will have no owning there. 339. The world is held in bondage by delusion is a description in terms of teaching applied to the perversions. 340. And only looks as though 'twere capable is a description in terms of the distorted applied to the world. 341. A fool is held in bondage by essentials of existence is a description in terms of giving being applied to recourse to evil wishes, a description in terms of function applied to the obsessions, a description in terms of strength applied to the defilements, a description in terms of development applied to determinations. 342. Wrapped in bewilderment is a description in terms of teaching applied to the murk of ignorance, and a description in terms of a synonym applied to it. 343. It will appear devoid of features is a description in terms of seeing applied to the heavenly eye, a description in terms of presentation applied to the eye of understanding. 344. To him who sees he will have no owning there is a description in terms of penetration applied to creatures. Lust is an owning, hate is an owning, delusion is an owning. That is why the Blessed One said, the world is held in bondage by delusion. 345. Because there is an unborn and unbrought to being and unmade and undetermined. If that were not unborn, unbrought to being, unmade, undetermined, no escape from the born, the brought to being, the made, the determined would be evident here. And it is because there is an unborn, an unbrought to being, an unmade and undetermined, that therefore the escape from the born, the brought to being, the made, the determined is evident. 346. If that were not unborn, unbrought to being, unmade, undetermined is a description in terms of the teaching applied to extinction, and a description in terms of synonyms applied to it. 347. No escape from the born, the brought to being, the made, the determined would be evident here is a description in terms of synonyms applied to the determined, and a description in terms of guiding example applied to it. 348. And it is because there is an unborn and unbrought to being and unmade and undetermined is a description in terms of synonyms applied to extinction, and a description in terms of illustrative proof applied to it. 349. That therefore the escape from the born, the brought to being, the made, the determined, is evident is a description in terms of synonyms applied to extinction, a description in terms of outlet applied to the path, a description in terms of escape applied to the roundabout of rebirths. That is why the Blessed One said, if that were not. 350. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, the Blessed One idea teaches, by means of manifold descriptions. This mood can thus be known to be the mode that does convey descriptions. The mode of conveying descriptions is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 12. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying ways of entry to the truths. 351. Herein, what is the mode of conveying ways of entry? It is this dependent rising faculties, categories, elements, bases. The mode that by these means gives entry is that conveying ways of entry. 352. Above, below, in every way released, and seeing not at all that I am this. Thus liberated, he has crossed the flood, not crossed before, for non-renewal of beings. 353. Above is the form element and the formless element. Below is the sensual desire element. In every way released. That is the adept's deliverance in the triple element of existence. That itself is the adept's 5 faculties. This is the way of entry by faculties. 354. These same adept's 5 faculties are science. With a rising of science, there is cessation of ignorance, nescience. With cessation of ignorance, cessation of determinations. With cessation of determinations, cessation of consciousness. With cessation of consciousness, cessation of name and form. With cessation of name and form, cessation of the sixfold base. With cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of contact. With cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With cessation of feeling, cessation of craving. With cessation of craving, cessation of assuming. With cessation of assuming, cessation of being. With cessation of being, cessation of birth. With cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is how there is a cessation to this whole category of suffering. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 355. Those same adepts' five faculties are comprised within the three categories, namely the virtue category, the concentration category, and the understanding category. This is the way of entry by categories. 356. Those same adepts' five faculties are included in determinations. These determinations, in this case free from taints and not factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 357. That idea element is included in the idea base, which base is, in this case, free from taints and not a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 358. And seeing not at all that I am this is the eradication of the embodiment view. That is the initiate's deliverance. That itself is the initiate's five faculties. This is the way of entry by faculties. 359. Those same initiate's five faculties are science. With the arising of science. Complete as in 354. So the whole dependent arising. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 360. That same science is the understanding category. This is the way of entry by categories. 361. That same science is included in determinations. These determinations, in this case free from taints and not factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 362. That idea element is included in the idea base, which is, in this case, free from taints and not a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 363. It is one liberated by means of the initiate's deliverance and the adept's deliverance who has crossed the flood not crossed before, for non-renewal of being. That is why the Blessed One said, above, below. 364. The supported is liable to dislodgement. The unsupported is not liable to dislodgement. When there is no liability to dislodgement, there is tranquility. When there is tranquility, there is no bent for naming. When there is no bent for naming, there is no coming and going. When there is no coming and going, there is no decease and reappearance. When there is no decease and reappearance, there is no here or beyond or in between. This is the end of suffering. 365. The supported is liable to dislodgement. Support is of two kinds, namely support by craving and support by view. Herein, any choice on the part of one who is lusting is support by craving, and any choice on the part of one who is confused is support by view. 366. Now choice is determinations. It is with determinations as condition that consciousness has actual being, with consciousness as condition, name, and form, and so with the whole dependent arising down to with birth as condition, aging and death have actual being, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is how there is an origin to this whole category of suffering. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 367. Herein any feeling in one who lusts is pleasant feeling, and any feeling in one who is confused is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. These feelings belong to the feeling category. This is the way of entry by categories. 368. Herein, pleasant feeling is two faculties, namely the bodily pleasure faculty and the mental joy faculty, and the neither painful nor pleasant feeling is the onlooking equanimity faculty. This is the way of entry by faculties. 369. Those same faculties are included in determinations. These determinations, in this case affected by taints and factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 370. That idea element is included in the idea base, which base is, in this case, affected by taints and a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 371. The unsupported is not liable to dislodgement, unsupported by craving and in virtue of quiet, and unsupported by view and in virtue of insight. 372. Any insight is science. With arising of science. There is cessation of ignorance. With cessation of ignorance, cessation of determinations. With cessation of determinations, cessation of consciousness. And thus the whole dependent arising. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 373. That same insight is the understanding category. This is the way of entry by categories. 374. That same insight is two faculties, namely the energy faculty and the understanding faculty. This is the way of entry by faculties. 375. That same insight is included in determinations. These determinations, in this case free from taints and not factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 376. That idea element is included in the idea base, which base is, in this case, free from taints and not a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 377. When there is tranquility, tranquility is of two kinds, namely bodily and mental. Any bodily pleasure is bodily tranquility, and any mental pleasure is mental tranquility. One who has bodily tranquility feels pleasure. When he is pleased, his cognizance is concentrated. One who is concentrated understands how things are. When he understands how things are, he finds dispassion. Finding dispassion, his lust fades. With the fading of lust, he is liberated. There is the knowledge, I am liberated. He understands birth is exhausted. The divine life has been lived out. What was to be done is done. There is no more of this beyond. 378. He has no bent for naming, in regard to forms or sounds or odors or flavors or tangibles or ideas because of the exhaustion of lust, because of the exhaustion of hate, because of the exhaustion of delusion. 379. He is liberated in the complete exhaustion of form owed to the exhaustion, fading, ceasing, giving up, and relinquishing of such form as that whereby he might describe a perfect one as standing or walking. He does not take for granted that there is a perfect one, and he does not take for granted that there is not. He does not take for granted that there is and there is not. He does not take for granted that there neither is nor is not, but rather he knows that he comes to be calculated as profound, immeasurable, incalculable, quenched, because of exhaustion of lust, because of exhaustion of hate, because of exhaustion of delusion. 380. He is liberated in the complete exhaustion of feeling. 381. Of perception. 382. Of determinations. 383. He is liberated in the complete exhaustion of consciousness owed to the exhaustion, fading, ceasing, giving up, and relinquishing of such consciousness as that whereby he might describe a perfect one as standing or walking. He does not take for granted that there is a perfect one, and he does not take for granted that there is not. He does not take for granted that there is and there is not. He does not take for granted that there neither is nor is not, but rather he knows that he comes to be calculated as profound, immeasurable, incalculable, quenched, because of extinction of lust, because of extinction of hate, because of extinction of delusion. 384. Coming is coming here. Going is any being existence, after passing away from this life. Both the coming and the going are no more. 385. Nor here. He sees no self in the six bases in oneself. 386. Nor beyond. He sees no self in the six external bases. 387. Nor in between. He sees no self in the ideas aroused by contact. 388. This is the end of suffering is dependent arising. That is of two kinds, namely belonging to worlds and disjoined from worlds. Herein, that belonging to worlds is that beginning, with ignorance as condition determinations, down as far as aging and death. That disjoined from worlds is that beginning. A virtuous man has no remorse, down as far as there is no more of this beyond. That is why the Blessed One said, the supported is liable to dislodgement. The unsupported is not liable to dislodgement. This is the end of suffering. 389. Whatever sorrows, lamentations, pains, of many kinds are found here in the world, that they exist is owed to something dear. With naught held dear they never come to be. So they are blissful, free from sorrowing, that nothing in the world hold dear at all. So would you sorrowless and stainless be, Hold nothing dear whatever in the world. 390. Whatever sorrows, lamentations, pains of many kinds are found here in the world, that they exist is owed to something dear. This is painful feeling. With naught held dear they never come to be. This is pleasant feeling. Feelings are the feeling category. This is the way of entry by categories. 391. With feeling as condition, craving, with craving as condition, assuming, with assuming as condition, birth, with birth as condition, aging and death, and so all the rest. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 392. Herein, pleasant feeling is two faculties, namely the pleasure faculty and the joy faculty. Painful feeling is two faculties, namely the pain faculty and the grief faculty. This is the way of entry by faculties. 393. Those same faculties are included in determinations. These determinations, in this case affected by taints and factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 394. That idea element is included in the idea base, which base is, in this case, affected by taints and a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 395. So they are blissful, free from sorrowing, that nothing in the world hold dear at all. So would you sorrowless and stainless be, hold nothing dear whatever in the world. This is the abandoning of craving. With cessation of craving, cessation of assuming. With cessation of assuming, cessation of being. And so all the rest. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 396. That same abandoning of craving is quiet. That quiet is of two kinds, namely the mindfulness faculty and the concentration faculty. This is the way of entry by faculties. 397. That same quiet is the concentration category. This is the way of entry by categories. 398. That same quiet is included in determinations. These determinations, in this case free from taints and not factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. 399. That idea element is included in the idea base, which is, in this case, free from taints and not a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. 400. When a mortal desires, if his desire is fulfilled, he is sure to be happy by getting what he wanted. Desire born and willful, if his desire fails him, he becomes as deformed as if pierced by a barb. Who shuns desires as a snake's head with his foot, and is mindful evades this attachment to the world. 401. Herein the happiness is approval. What is stated by he becomes as deformed as if pierced by a barb is resistance. Now approval and resistance are sides of craving. The 10 bases having form are the footing for craving. This is the way of entry by bases. 402. Those same bases having form are the form body associated with name. Both together are name and form. With name and form as condition, the sixfold base. With the sixfold base as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. And so all the rest. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 403. That same name and form is the 5 categories. This is the way of entry by categories. 404. That same name and form is the 18 elements. This is the way of entry by elements. 405. Herein, the form body is the 5 faculties having form, and the name body is the 5 formless faculties. These are 10 faculties. This is the way of entry by faculties. 406. Herein, what is stated by who shuns desires, as a snake's head with his foot, and is mindful, evades this attachment to the world, is the element of extinction with trace left. This is the way of entry by elements. 407. That same extinction element with trace left is science. With arising of science, cessation of ignorance, nescience. With cessation of ignorance, cessation of determinations. And so all the rest. This is the way of entry by the two aspects of dependent arising. 408. That same science is the understanding category. This is the way of entry by categories. 409. That same science is 2 faculties, namely the energy faculty and the understanding faculty. This is the way of entry by faculties. 410. That same science is included in determinations. These determinations, in this case free from taints and not factors of being, are comprised within the idea element. This is the way of entry by elements. For 11. That idea element is included in the idea base, which base is, in this case free from taints and not a factor of being. This is the way of entry by bases. That is why the Blessed One said, when a mortal desires. 412. At this point the formula of dependent arising, the faculties, the categories, the elements, and the bases have come to be made ways of entry and meeting places. That is how dependent arising, faculties, categories, and bases can be made ways of entry. For 13. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, dependent rising, faculties, categories, elements, bases, the mode that by these means gives entry, is that conveying ways of entry. The mode of conveying ways of entry is ended. Previous. Conveying descriptions, analysis. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter-demonstrative subsection. Continued. 13. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a clearing up. For 14. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a clearing up? It is stated in the verse, seeking if in a question answered. What in the verse did instigate? Its asking is cleared up or not. This mode conveys a clearing up. For 15. For instance, in the Parayana chapter of the Satanapada, the Venerable Ajita asked the Blessed One the question, and received the answer thus. Tell what is the world shut in by, and wherefore is it not displayed, and what is it besmeared with? Say, and what will be its greatest fear? By ignorance is the world shut in. Ajita, the Blessed One, said. 'Tis undisplayed through miswishing and neglect, and hankering smears it, I say. Suffering is its greatest fear. For 16. In the case of the question, tell what is the world shut in by? The Blessed One, with his answer, by ignorance is the world shut in, clears up a term but not the instigation. In the case of the question, and wherefore is it not displayed? The Blessed One, with his answer, 'tis undisplayed through miswishing and neglect, clears up a term but not the instigation. In the case of the question, and what is it besmeared with? Say, the Blessed One, with his answer, and hankering smears it, I say, clears up a term but not the instigation. But, in the case of the question, and what will be its greatest fear? The Blessed One, with his answer, suffering is its greatest fear, clears up a term, and the instigation is cleared up too. That is why the Blessed One said, by ignorance is the world shut in. For 17. Again there are the following question and answer. The streams keep streaming everywhere. So said the Venerable Ajita. What is it that shuts off the streams? Tell then what is restraint of streams, whereby it is that streams are sealed. Whatever streams are in the world, Ajita, the Blessed One, said, they are shut off by mindfulness. The stream's restraint, I tell, whereby they can be sealed, is understanding. For 18. In the case of the question, the streams keep streaming everywhere. What is it that shuts off the streams? The Blessed One, with his answer, whatever streams are in the world, they are shut off by mindfulness, clears up a term but not the instigation. In the case of the question, tell then what is restraint of streams, whereby it is that streams are sealed. With the answer, the stream's restraint, I tell, whereby they can be sealed, is understanding, the instigation is cleared up. That is why the Blessed One said, whatever streams are in the world. For 19. Again, in the case of the question, understanding and mindfulness. So said the Venerable Ajita. And now, good sir, this name and form, tell me then what I ask of you, where does it came to its surcease? With the answer, as to the question that you ask, Ajita, I shall tell you now, where both this name and form do come, to their remainderless surcease, with cessation of consciousness. 'Tis here this comes to its surcease. The instigation is cleared up. That is why the Blessed One said, as to the question that you ask. For 20. Wherever the instigation is cleared up in this way, the question is answered. But wherever the instigation is not cleared up, that question is not yet answered. 421. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, seeking if in a question answered, what in the verse did instigate, its asking is cleared up or not. This mode conveys a clearing up. The mode of conveying a clearing up is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 14. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying terms of expression. 422. Herein, what is the mode of conveying terms of expression? It is this. Ideas, when demonstrated by both unity and diversity, need thereby suffer no disjunction. This mode conveys expressions terms. 423. Those ideas should be remembered according as they are demonstrated there where they appear in their contexts as follows. 424. Suffering is a unity. Herein, what is suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, association with the loathed is suffering, dissociation from the loved is suffering, not to get one's wish is suffering. In brief, the 5 categories of assumption are suffering, form is suffering, feeling is suffering, perception is suffering, determinations are suffering, consciousness is suffering. This is a diversity. 425. The origin of suffering is a unity. Herein, what is the origin of suffering? It is that craving which renews being, existence, is accompanied by relish and lust, relishing this and that, namely craving for sensual desires, craving for being, existence, craving for non-being, non-existence. This is a diversity. 426. Cessation of suffering is a unity. Herein, what is cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading of that same craving, its ceasing, giving it up, relinquishing it, letting it go, non-relying on it, and rejecting it. This is diversity. 427. The way leading to cessation of suffering is a unity. Herein, what is the way leading to cessation of suffering? It is the noble 8-factored path, that is to say, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is a diversity. 428. Path is a unity. Herein, what is a path? It is the path leading to hell, the path leading to the animal womb, the path leading to the ghost realm, the path leading to the Asura demon womb, the path leading to heaven, the path leading to humanity, the path leading to extinction. This is a diversity. 429. Cessation is a unity. Herein, what is cessation? It is deliberate cessation, undeliberate cessation, cessation of approval, cessation of resistance, cessation of conceit, cessation of contempt, cessation of domineering, cessation of envy, cessation of avarice, cessation of all defilements. This is a diversity. 430. Form is a unity. Herein, what is form? Form is the 4 great entities, and any description of form assuming the 4 great entities. 431. Herein, what are the 4 great entities? They are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the air element. These elements can be comprised in 2 moods, namely in brief, as above, and in detail. 432. How does one comprise the elements in detail? One comprises the earth element in detail in 20 moods. One comprises the water element in detail in 12 moods. One comprises the fire element in detail in 4 moods. And one comprises the air element in detail in 6 moods. 433. In what 20 moods does one comprise the earth element in detail? There are in this body head hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidney, heart, liver, midriff, spleen, lights, bowels, entrails, gorge, dung, and brain in the head. One comprises the earth element in detail in these 20 moods. 434. In what 12 moods does one comprise the water element in detail? There are in this body bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. One comprises the water element in detail in these 12 moods. 435. In what 4 moods does one comprise the fire element in detail? There is that whereby one is warmed, whereby one ages, whereby one burns, and whereby what is eaten, drunk, chewed, and tasted gets completely digested. One comprises the fire element in detail in these 4 moods. For 36. In what 6 moods does one comprise the air element in detail? There are upgoing forces, downgoing forces, forces in the paunch, forces in the belly, forces that course through the limbs, and in breath and out-breath. That is how one comprises the air element in detail in 6 moods. For 37. He who thus in detail recharacterizes, estimates, fathoms, inquires into and reviews the elements as to individual essence in these 42 moods sees nothing at all worth taking, whether body or bodily part. Just as one who investigated a cesspool would see nothing at all worth taking, just as one who investigated a privy would see nothing worth taking, so too he who thus in detail recharacterizes, estimates, fathoms, inquires into and reviews the elements as to individual essence in these 42 moods sees nothing at all worth taking, whether body or bodily part. For 38. That is why the Blessed One said, now both the earth element in oneself and the external earth element should be seen, with right understanding how they are, in this way. I am not this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. On seeing it thus, with right understanding how it is, he finds dispassion in the earth element, and lust for the earth element fades from his heart. Now both the water element in oneself and the external water element, both the fire element in oneself and the external fire element, both the air element in oneself and the external air element should be seen with right understanding how they are, in this way. I am not this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. On seeing it thus, with right understanding how it is, he finds dispassion in the air element, and lust for the air element fades from his heart. This is a diversity. For 39. Ignorance is a unity. Herein, what is ignorance? It is unknowing about suffering, unknowing about the origin of suffering, unknowing about cessation of suffering, and unknowing about the way leading to cessation of suffering. Unknowing about the past, unknowing about the future, unknowing about the past and future. Unknowing about specific conditionality and dependently arisen ideas. It is any such unknowing, unseeing, non-actualization, failure to be enlightened by another, failure to enlighten oneself, non-penetration, failure to characterize, failure to recharacterize, failure to counter-characterize, disregard, inexperience, witlessness, folly, unawareness, delusion, illusion, confusion, ignorance, flood of ignorance, bond of ignorance, underlying tendency to ignorance, obsession by ignorance, lock of ignorance, delusion as a root of the unprofitable. This is a diversity. For 40. Science is a unity. Herein, what is science? It is knowledge about suffering, knowledge about the origin of suffering, knowledge about cessation of suffering, knowledge about the way leading to cessation of suffering. Knowledge about the past, knowledge about the future, knowledge about the past and future. Knowledge about specific conditionality and dependently arisen ideas. It is any such understanding, active understanding, investigation, reinvestigation, investigation of ideas, characterization, recharacterization, counter, characterization, wisdom, skill, cleverness, elucidation, cogitation, scrutiny, breadth, wit, guidance, insight, awareness, goad, understanding faculty, understanding power, understanding weapon, understanding storied palace, understanding light, understanding illumination, understanding lucidity, understanding jewel, non-delusion, investigation of ideas, right view, investigation of ideas, enlightenment factor, path factor included in the path. This is a diversity. For 41. Attainment is a unity. Herein, what is attainment? There is percipient attainment, unpercipient attainment, neither percipient nor unpercipient attainment, attainment percipient of non-entity, attainment of cessation. This is a diversity. For 42. Meditator is a unity. Herein, what is a meditator? There is the initiate meditator, there is the adept meditator, there is the neither initiate nor adept meditator, there is the thoroughbred meditator, there is the cult meditator, there is the meditator governed by views, there is the meditator governed by craving, there is the meditator governed by understanding. This is a diversity. For 43. Concentration is a unity. Herein, what is concentration? There is concentration with conflict, concentration without conflict, concentration with risk, concentration without risk, concentration with ill will, concentration with non-ill will, concentration with happiness, i.e., the first two meditations, concentration free from happiness, i.e., the last two meditations, materialistic concentration, non-materialistic concentration, concentration with prompting determinations, concentration without prompting determinations, concentration kept in being. Unilaterally, concentration kept in being bilaterally, concentration whose keeping in being is both ways kept in being. Concentration with thought and exploring, concentration without thought and with mere exploration, concentration without thought and without exploring. Concentration dealing with an inferior state, concentration dealing with steadiness, concentration dealing with distinction, concentration dealing with penetration. Concentration belonging to worlds, concentration disjoined from worlds. Wrong concentration, right concentration. This is a diversity. For 44. Way is a unity. Herein, what is a way? There is the way of luxury, the way of austerity, the middle way, the way of the impatient, the way of the patient, the way of quieting, the way of taming, the painful way with sluggish acquaintanceship, the painful way with swift acquaintanceship, the pleasant way with sluggish acquaintanceship, the pleasant way with swift acquaintanceship. This is a diversity. For 45. Body is a unity. Herein, what is a body? There are the name body and the form body. Herein, what is the form body? It is head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidney, heart, liver, midriff, spleen, lights, bowels, entrails, gorge, dung, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, urine, and brain in the head. This is the form body. The name body consists of feeling, perception, choice, cognizance, contact, and attention. This is the name body. This is a diversity. For 46. In this way, while some ideas say, birth has the same essence, namely suffering in this instance, as that of some other related idea, say, aging in this instance, that former idea finds unity with this latter idea through their common unity, yet it has diversity from it in virtue of that whereby it has its differentiating particular characteristic. So when one is asked about the tread type, which term covers all modes of the teaching, or about prose expositions or about verse, the inquiry should be made as follows. How, then, does he ask according to unity or according to diversity? If asked according to a unity, then it should be answered according to the unity. If asked according to a diversity, then it should be answered according to the diversity. If asked expressed in terms of creatures, the answer should be expressed in terms of creatures. If asked expressed in terms of ideas, the answer should be expressed in terms of ideas. According as it is asked, so it should be answered. For 47. That is why the Venerable Mahakaccana said, ideas when demonstrated by both unity and diversity need thereby suffer no disjunction. This mode conveys expressions terms. The mode conveying terms of expression is ended. The Guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 15. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying requisites. For 48. Herein, what is the mode of conveying requisites? It is this. Ideas that generate each an idea. In due relation are conditions, and by its picking out the cause. This mode conveys the requisite. For 49. Any idea that generates an idea is a requisite of that idea. For 50. What is the requisite's characteristic? The requisite has the characteristic of a generator. For 51. Two kinds of ideas generate, namely a cause and a condition. For 52. Herein, what is a cause's characteristic? What is a condition's characteristic? A cause has the characteristic of not being shared in common, while a condition has the characteristic of being shared in common. For 53. How might that be? In the same way that for the occurrence of a seed's sprout, the seed is not shared in common with the sprout, while earth and water are common to both seed and sprout. For while the earth and the water are each a condition for the sprout, still individual essence is its cause. Or in the same way that milk left in a pot is curd, and yet there is no simultaneous concurrence of milk and curd, so too there is no simultaneous concurrence of the cause and the condition. For 54. Now this roundabout of rebirths has occurrence with cause and with condition. For this is said, with ignorance as condition determinations, with determinations as condition consciousness, and so with all the formula of dependent arising. Consequently, ignorance is the cause and unreasoned attention the condition. For 55. Previous ignorance is the cause of subsequent ignorance. Herein, the previous ignorance is underlying tendency to ignorance, while the subsequent ignorance is open obsession by ignorance. The previous underlying tendency to ignorance is the cause, in causality by immediate proximity, of the subsequent obsession by ignorance, like the seed and the sprout in the growing. But wherever any fruit of that seed occurs, this seed is then only the cause in remote relation of that fruit. For cause is of two kinds, namely cause in immediate proximity, as that of the seed for the sprout, and cause in remote relation, as that of the seed for the fruit. So the cause of ignorance is also of two kinds, namely cause in immediate proximity and cause in remote relation. For 56. Or in the same way that vessel, wick and oil are, as it were, the light's condition, but not its cause as individual essence, for one cannot, without a flame, light the vessel, wick and oil, which are the light's condition, the individual essence as cause being like the light. So the individual essence is the cause, while the other essence is the condition. The in itself is the cause, while the external to it is the condition. The generator is the cause, while the accessory is the condition. The not shared in common is the cause, while the shared in common is the condition. For 57. The meaning of continuity, the meaning of non-interruption, the meaning of fruit, the meaning of being made to occur, the meaning of renewal of being, the meaning of relinging, the meaning of obsession, the meaning of impediment, the meaning of underlying tendency, the meaning of non-eradication, the meaning of ignorance, the meaning of non-penetration, the meaning of being undiagnosed, are consciousness's meaning of seed. For 58. Where there is non-interruption there is continuity, where there is continuity there is occurrence, where there is occurrence there is fruit, where there is fruit there is relinging, where there is relinging there is renewal of being, where there is renewal of being there is impediment, where there is impediment there is obsession, where there is obsession there is non-eradication, where there is non-eradication there is underlying tendency, where there is underlying tendency there is non-penetration, where there is non-penetration there is ignorance, where there is ignorance there is undiagnosed consciousness affected by taints, where there is undiagnosed consciousness affected by taints there is the meaning of seed. For 59. The virtue category is the condition for the concentration category is the condition for the understanding category is the condition for the deliverance category is the condition for the knowing and seeing of deliverance category. For 60. Knowledge of watering places is the condition for knowledge of what it is to have drunk enough. Knowledge of what it is to have drunk enough is the condition for knowledge of the right amount. Knowledge of the right amount is the condition for knowledge of self. For 61. Or in the same way that I consciousness arises depending upon I and forms herein, the I is a condition through the conditionality of predominance, while forms are a condition through conditionality of object. Light is a condition through co-supporting and attention as the individual essence is the cause. For 62. While consciousness's condition is determinations, its individual essence is its cause. While name and form's condition is consciousness, its individual essence is its cause. While the sixfold basis condition is name and form, its individual essence is its cause. While contact's condition is the sixfold base, its individual essence is its cause. While feeling's condition is contact, its individual essence is its cause. While craving's condition is feeling, its individual essence is its cause. While assuming's condition is craving, its individual essence is its cause. While being's condition is assuming, its individual essence is its cause. While birth's condition is being, its individual essence is its cause. While aging and death's condition is birth, its individual essence is its cause. While sorrow's condition is aging and death, its individual essence is its cause. While lamentation's condition is sorrow, its individual essence is its cause. While pain's condition is lamentation, its individual essence is its cause. While grief's condition is pain, its individual essence is its cause. While despair's condition is grief, its individual essence is its cause. For 63. In this way all kinds of general support are a requisite. For 64. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, ideas that generate each an idea. In due relation are conditions, and by its picking out the cause. This mode conveys the requisite. The mode of conveying requisites is ended. The guide. B. Specification section. 3. Counter demonstrative subsection. Continued. 16. The ninefold thread in the mode of conveying a coordination. For 65. Herein, what is the mode of conveying a coordination? It is this: ideas with those whose roots they are, and those shown by the sage to have one meaning, should be coordinated. This mode conveys coordination. For 66. As many footings as furnish ways of entry should all be coordinated with any single footing mentioned. In the same way as, in the mode of conveying a conversion, several footings are made to furnish ways of entry. For 67. Herein, coordination is of 4 kinds, namely I footing, 2 synonym, 3, keeping in being, and 4, abandoning. I footing. For 68. Herein, what is coordination of footing? No doing any kind of evil, perfecting profitable skill, and purifying one's own heart. This is the Buddha's dispensation. For 69. What is the footing for that? The 3 kinds of good conduct, namely bodily good conduct, verbal good conduct, and mental good conduct. These are a footing. For 70. Herein, any bodily and verbal good conduct are the virtue category. In the case of mental good conduct, any uncovetousness and non-ill will are the concentration category, and any right view is the understanding category. These are a footing. For 71. Herein, the virtue category and the concentration category are quiet, and the understanding category is insight. These are a footing. For 72. Herein, the fruit of quiet is the heart deliverance due to fading of lust, and the fruit of insight is the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. These are a footing. For 73. The wood is the footing for the woodedness. What is the wood and what is the woodedness? The wood means the 5 strands of sensual desire, while the woodedness means craving. This is a footing. For 74. The wood means the apprehending by signs of woman or man, while the woodedness is the apprehending of such and such limbs as features thus, oh an eye, oh an ear, oh a nose, oh a tongue, oh a body. This is a footing. For 75. The wood means the undiagnosed bases in oneself and external thereto, and the woodedness means any fetter that arises dependent on these. This is a footing. For 76. The wood is the underlying tendency and the woodedness is the manifest obsession. This is a footing. For 77. That is why the Blessed One said, having cut down the wood and woodedness. This is coordination of footing. 2. Synonym. For 78. Herein, what is coordination of synonym? The heart deliverance due to fading of lust is the initiate's fruit, and the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance is the adept's fruit. These are synonyms. For 79. The heart deliverance due to fading of lust is the non-returner's fruit, and the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance is arahantship, the highest fruit. These are synonyms. For 80. The heart deliverance due to fading of lust surmounts the element of sensual desire, and the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance surmounts the threefold element of sensual desire, form, and formless existence. These are synonyms. For 81. Understanding faculty, understanding power, training in the higher understanding, understanding category, investigation of ideas, enlightenment factor, equanimity, enlightenment factor, knowledge, right view, judgment, a judgment, conscience, insight, knowledge of the true idea. All these are synonyms. This is coordination of synonym. 3. Keeping in being. For 82. Herein, what is coordination of keeping in being? It is according as the Blessed One said, therefore, Bhikkhus, abide contemplating the body as a body, ardent, aware and mindful, guiding out covetousness and grief about the world. Now, ardent means the energy faculty, aware, the understanding faculty, mindful, the mindfulness faculty, and guiding out covetousness and grief about the world, the concentration faculty. So when someone abides contemplating the body as a body, the four foundations of mindfulness come to fulfillment through keeping in being. For what reason? Because of the four faculties state of single characteristic. For 83. When the four foundations of mindfulness are kept in being, the four right endeavors come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the four right endeavors are kept in being, the four bases for success, roads to power, come to fulfillment through keeping in being. When the four bases for success are kept in being, the five faculties come to fulfillment through keeping in being, and so all. For what reason? Because all the ideas that lead to enlightenment, that partake of enlightenment, have a single characteristic in the characteristic of outlet. They come to fulfillment through keeping in being owing to singleness of characteristic. This is coordination of keeping in being. 4. Abandoning. For 84. Herein, what is coordination of abandoning? One who abides contemplating the body as a body abandons the perversion that there is beauty in the ugly, physical nutriment comes within his diagnosis. He is without assuming in regard to sensual desire assuming. He is unbound in regard to the bond of sensual desire. He is dissociated in regard to the bodily tie of covetousness. He is taintless in regard to the taint of sensual desire. He has crossed over the flood of sensual desire. He is barbless as regards the barb of lust. Form as a steadying point for consciousness passing on comes within his diagnosis. His lust for the form element is abandoned, and he does not go a bad way through will. For 85. One who abides contemplating feelings as feelings abandons the perversion that there is pleasure in the painful, contact as nutriment comes within his diagnosis. He is without assuming in regard to existence assuming. He is unbound in regard to the bond of existence. He is dissociated in regard to the bodily tie of ill will. He is taintless in regard to the taint of existence. He has crossed over the flood of existence. He is barbless in regard to the barb of hate. Feeling as a steadying point for consciousness passing on comes within his diagnosis. His lust for the feeling element is abandoned, and he does not go a bad way through hate. For 86. One who abides contemplating cognizance as cognizance abandons the perversion that there is permanence in the impermanent, consciousness as nutriment comes within his diagnosis. He is without assuming in regard to wrong view assuming. He is unbound in regard to the bond of views. He is dissociated in regard to the bodily tie of misapprehension of virtue and duty. He is taintless in regard to the taint of views. He has crossed over the flood of views. He is barbless in regard to the barb of conceit. Perception as a steadying point for consciousness passing on comes within his diagnosis. His lust for the perception element is abandoned, and he does not go a wrong way through fear. For 87. One who abides contemplating ideas as ideas abandons the perversion that there is self in the not self. Mind choice as nutriment comes within his diagnosis. He is without assuming in regard to self-doctrine assuming. He is unbound in regard to the bond of ignorance. He is dissociated in regard to the bodily tie of insistence that only this is the truth. He is taintless in regard to the taint of ignorance. He has crossed over the flood of ignorance. He is barbless in regard to the barb of delusion. Determinations as a steadying point for consciousness passing on comes within his diagnosis. His lust for the determinations element is abandoned, and he does not go a bad way through delusion. This is coordination of abandoning. For 88. That is why the Venerable Mahakakana said, ideas with those whose roots they are, and those shown by the sage to have one meaning, should be coordinated. This mode conveys coordination. The mode of conveying a coordination is ended. The 16 modes of conveying in separate treatment are ended.